Chapter 599. Brother, please help yourself. I'm going to see Imperial Grandmother. Chu Luchen raised his cold eyes and looked at Chu Luyue, who looked amiable. The coldness in his glass-like eyes made the smile on Chu Luyue's face a little stiff. Third brother, please help yourself. Chu Luyue made way for him. Chu Luchen nodded. Xiao Xuanzi turned his wheelchair in another direction and then went to the Empress Dowager's Palace of Benevolent Peace. Looking at Chu Liuchen's back, Chu Luyue still wore a smile, but his face became gloomy. He walked out slowly with his hands clasped behind his back. He also wanted to figure out why this happened. He was confident that Wen Shiqi would handle this matter. With Wen Shiqi's intelligence, it was impossible for him to spread this matter so widely and bring a small matter in the inner courtyard of a boudoir to the imperial court. Just now, when several memorials were thrown at him, he also stole a glance at them and found that they were all talking about this jinx. All the ministers in the imperial court actually believed in the bane. It could be seen that his father must have suspected them. He was sure that someone had deliberately made a big fuss after the matter between him and Wen Shiqi, just to make his father suspect him. At this time, he couldn't act rashly. Originally, he wanted to show his affection for the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion in front of his father, but now he couldn't act rashly. If his father thought of Xiao Yanru, it was very likely that he would be implicated. During this period, he had to distance himself from Xiao Yanru so as not to get into trouble. As for Wen Shiqi, he should not act rashly. He should not do anything rashly in the following days. Just let them be about the bane. No matter what happens next, I can't get them involved. I don't need to worry about Wen Shiqi because he will definitely punish him, but I can't have too much contact with him in private during this period. After thinking about this, Chu Luyue looked a little better. She felt a little regretful that she had interfered in Xiao Yanru's affairs at that time. It was just a fight between the women in the backyard, and Duke Xing's mansion really lacked dignity and tolerance. Xiao Yanru was just a new Mississippi. When she grew up and got married, Duke Xing's mansion would give her an extra dowry. Why couldn't they tolerate her and forced her to a dead end? At this moment, he felt disdainful in his heart and only thought that Xiao Yanru was not as good as he had imagined. If he really married her, could she really handle the affairs of his backyard well? The rumors about the bane in the capital came with great momentum, but they disappeared without a trace within a day. For this reason, Madame Dong specially came here from the foot of the mountain to report it to Xiao Wanru. It was said that the officials were still investigating where the news came from, but there was one thing that they couldn't figure out until now. They didn't know how it got out. It was also said that a foreign visitor in the capital heard it when he was chatting with someone. However, the foreign visitor just went to the capital for a walk and no one knew where he went after that. The rumor of the Bane Star was gone, and the previous rumor rose again. Connected with the Bane Star incident, all the public opinions pointed directly at Duke Xing's mansion, and they all thought that Duke Xing was the source of all the troubles. Of course, these rumors were only talked about in private now, and they didn't dare to talk about it in public. Those who had talked about the bane enthusiastically before had been arrested. At this time, no one dared to spread it, for fear that they would accidentally provoke someone. Duke Xing also held real power. In addition to the news, Madame Dong also brought the news about Fanglan embroidery shop. At first, this embroidery shop was going to merge with Butterfly clothing shop, with Fanglan embroidery shop as a shareholder. But later, after Xiao Wanru made a clever deal, she made a concession to help each other. She only said that if one of the two was short of money, it could withdraw a certain amount from the other first, which could be regarded as a mutual benefit. Miss Fanglan embroidery shop said that it wanted to borrow a sum of silver. The amount this time is a little big, and I can't make the decision. Madame Dong took out a piece of paper from her bosom and said. Butterfly clothing shop had always been very stable. Although its business was not very big, it was good and its funds were not broken. In the past few years, it had not borrowed money from Fanglan embroidery shop at any time. However, Fanglan embroidery shop borrowed money from Butterfly clothing shop from time to time more than 10 times. Sometimes the amount was quite large. When the amount was very large, Madame Dong didn't dare to make the decision and directly turned to Xiao Wanru. Fortunately, Fanglan embroidery shop kept its word. After borrowing money, it would return it soon. Have you seen their account book? Xiao Wanru calmly looked at the seal under the IOU of Fanglan embroidery shop and asked. In the past 3 years, she had seen it dozens of times, and now she looked very familiar with it. I haven't seen it yet. If you think it's feasible, I'll ask someone to check the account and have a look at the account book. Madame Dong reported. Fanglan embroidery shop said that they were short of funds for a while, which was not groundless. Naturally, they had to show the account book to Madame Dong. Just like before, after reading the account book and feeling that there is no mistake, I will borrow the money. Xiao Wanru nodded and returned the IOU to Madame Dong. I understand. Madame Dong nodded and put the IOU into her bosom. Then she hesitated for a moment, looking a little hesitant. What else? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and said softly. I seem to have seen an acquaintance a few days ago. Madame Dong said hesitantly, but I didn't see it clearly for a while, so I don't know if it's her. Who? Xiao Wanru asked with a smile. It seems to be from Jiangzhou magistrate's mansion. She should be the personal old maid of the magistrate's wife. When I was in Jiangzhou, I saw her several times, so I know her, Madame Dong said. The personal old maid of Magistrate Qi's wife. Since she was a personal old maid, she usually followed her master to serve her. Could it be that Magistrate Qi had come to the capital city? Go and inquire about Magistrate Qi. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and ordered. She didn't know whether Magistrate Qi had come to the capital city in the last life, but even if what had happened in the last life was not necessarily the same in this life. In this life, many things had changed, and there were many things that even she didn't know. Qi Tianyu came in a hurry that day and disappeared after framing her. She always felt that Qi Tianyu would not leave so easily. If he had let go of what had happened 3 years ago, that day would not have happened. Of course, it might be another way of saying that he was plotting something against her now. Okay, I'll go back and inquire about it. Madame Dong nodded and left. After that, she told Xiao Wanru some trivial things and went down the mountain in a hurry after chatting for a while. Yujie walked Madame Dong to the gate of the courtyard and asked her to go out on her own. After Madame Dong left, Yujie returned to the silence room. Miss, is the first miss really not coming back? Yujie poured a cup of tea for Xiao Wanru, put down the tea, pointed in the direction of the main room, and said. She won't come back. Xiao Wanru said with certainty. She didn't expect that Xiao Yenru would be so decisive. She left decisively before many things that she had buried were revealed, as if she had not been involved in them at all. But this also showed her scheming. Sure enough, she had underestimated her. She had thought that with so many clues in her hands, she would make use of them little by little. But now she left decisively and only said that she would go back to find out what had happened before. If she didn't find out the truth, she would be too ashamed to see her. These words immediately left a good impression on Xiao Yenru. Xiao Yenru was indeed a strong opponent of hers. She had cut off the connection with her before she was defeated. No wonder she had died in her hands in the last life, but it seemed that she had no problem at all. That dress. Yujie reached out and pointed to the corner, where there was a locked box. The clothes in it were very fancy and beautiful, extremely gorgeous and bright, which were completely different from the tone of the entire Yuhui nunnery. It was a dress that should not have appeared in this matter. Don't worry about it. Since she let it go, she must be unwilling to let it go like this. It's just that she thinks it's not the best time. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and said with cold eyes. Although Xiao Yenru had left decisively, she still wanted to keep some clues that had not been revealed. For example, the clothes, and the silence room. If she still wants to care about the clothes, she will definitely go up the mountain again. But Miss said that she won't go up the mountain. What does she want to do with the clothes? Yujia asked in confusion. The clothes were found in Mrs. Silent's room in the Yuhui nunnery, which made people think that Miss was practicing in seclusion on the mountain, but in fact, she didn't have any filial piety at all. If she went down the mountain, even if the clothes were gorgeous, others would only think that Miss was a little extravagant, and it would not cause any harm to Mississippi, so, there should be more people going up the mountain. Xiao Wanru said meaningfully. If someone went down the mountain, someone would go up the mountain. It seemed that this person should know her. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to come to her Silence room and enter the room. For a moment, she couldn't guess who Xiao Yenshu would send to the Yuhui nunnery. But there was one thing she was sure of. Xiao Yenru would never let go of the clues she had buried before. She would send someone up the mountain. Moreover, this person was related to her, so she couldn't be implicated if something went wrong. She picked up the cup at hand and took a sip gently. With a faint sneer at the corner of her mouth, she suddenly could guess who the person was. Compared with Xiao Yenru, this person was really no match for Xiao Yenru, but it was just right to use him to deal with her. It was related to their identities and nothing else. In fact, she couldn't stay in the Yuhui nunnery anymore. Behind the high walls were the former emperor's concubines, and there was a posthumous son of the former emperor. In fact, it would not be quiet here. Now it was just the beginning, but she couldn't leave on her own. So now it was the best time. No matter what Xiao Yenru did, there would inevitably be an accident. She just needed to beat Xiao Yenru at her own game. Xiao Wanru had already prepared for the next step, but Qi Rongji had already been ordered to find this person. There were a lot of people coming and going on the street. Sitting by the window of the private room, Qi Rongji watched the people coming and going outside the window. It was very lively, but it seemed that the lively people were only others. Qi Rongji felt like a passerby, watching other people's affairs, just like she was in Duke Xing's mansion, almost a transparent existence. Everyone knew that she was not liked by Madam of Duke Xing and Old Madam. They just recognized her and raised her in the mansion. With such a bowl of rice, the mansion could afford to raise her. Chapter 600. I remember it in 1 second. Wonderful, no pop-up window, free to read. But what she got today was not the good marriage she had imagined. She was not young anymore, but she had not even been engaged. Because Xiao Yenru was the eldest in the whole Duke Xing's mansion, her marriage had not been arranged, so she had not been engaged for the time being. This reason was very reasonable, unless Qi Rongji's biological parents proposed marriage for her. But Magistrate Qi was far away in Jiangzhou. Besides, even if he was in the capital city, how many people would be willing to marry the daughter of a remote magistrate seriously? She closed her eyes tightly. When she opened them again, she was not as sad as before. Her eyes were light and gentle, very much like Xiao Yenru's in the past. After being with Xiao Yenru for a long time, she had improved her behavior and manners. Miss, the young madam of Duke Yang's mansion is here. Chuani came in to report. Invite Sister Yuru in. Qi Rongji smiled slightly, stood up, and went out to welcome her. The door of the private room opened, and Qin Yuru was standing outside. When she saw Qin Yuru in front of her, even though Qi Rongji had been prepared, she was still shocked by the person in front of her. Was this still Qin Yuru? In the past, Qin Yuru was lively, charming, and good-looking. She and Qi Rongji were ranked as the two beauties in Jiangzhou, and she was loved by Qi Tianyu. In Jiangzhou, she was like a fish in water, delicate and refined. But the person in front of her, if they did not pass by each other on the street, Qi Rongji felt that she could not recognize this person as Qin Yuru, who grew up with her. He was so thin that he was almost out of shape. Even his hair was withered and gray. Even though the hair on his head was very gorgeous, it was just like a wooden frame. It did not have the liveliness and flexibility of the past. His eyes were gray and gloomy. When he looked at people, it inexplicably made people's hearts turn cold. She was about 10 years old, as if she was a woman in her 30s. Sister Yuru, you. Qi Rongji was not pretending to be surprised. In the past 3 years, she had never seen Chin Yuru. She did not expect that Chin Yuru had become like this. What? You don't recognize me? Chin Yuru asked coldly with a sarcastic smile. No. How could I not know him? I just didn't expect. Chi Rongji reached out to hold Chin Yuru's hand affectionately and led her into the private room. Then, they both sat down. She picked up the teapot and poured a cup of water for Chin Yuru. She pushed it in front of Chin Yuru and said, Sister Yuru, you married into your own maternal family. Why are you so thin? Are you sick? It was as if he had transformed into a completely different person. The change was so drastic that Chi Rongji was still in shock. She even asked the question that had been bothering her for a long time. I'm not sick. Tell me, what do you want from me? Chin Yuru looked at her coldly and asked impolitely. Sister Yuru, I'm here to see you today. Chi Rongji sighed softly and her expression turned gloomy. Thinking back to when we were in Jiangzhou, and looking at now, it's not as early as before. If I had known that I would end up like this, I would not have followed your Qin's mansion to the capital. Jiangzhou is a small place, but it's still possible to find a handsome and capable man to marry. After saying that, she picked up the teacup and took a sip. There was a bitter smile on her face. You didn't get engaged? Chin Yuru asked with a sarcastic smile. No, I don't know when. Since First Miss didn't get engaged, those of us who were born later couldn't get engaged either. Chi Rongji ordered Chun Yi, who was beside her. Go to the restaurant opposite and buy 2 pots of wine. It's rare for me to get together with Sister Yuru today. We are all in the same boat. Let's drink secretly and get drunk secretly like we used to. Chun Yi answered and left. Seeing Chi Rongji's expression and her words touched Chin Yuru looked a little better. She didn't refuse but just glanced at her and asked, It's okay that I can't get married, but can't I get engaged? The rules of Duke Xing's mansion are really strict. It's not that I can't get engaged. It's just that no one cares about this kind of thing. First Miss is too busy with her own affairs. Who cares about this kind of thing? Chi Rongji drank the tea as if it was wine and took a big sip. She can't even take care of her own daughter. How can she care about me, an outsider? Didn't you go to Duke Xing's mansion very complacently at that time? Seeing Chi Rongji like this, Chin Yuru felt relieved. I was not sensible at that time. I thought that I would definitely have a good marriage after I entered Duke Xing's mansion. But now it seems that it's better not to go. At least it's clean. Chi Rongji became more sad and her eyes turned red. She stood up and bowed to Chin Yuru. If the rumors outside have hurt Sister Yuru, I'm here to ask for punishment. Chin Yuru reached out her hand and slapped Chi Rongji's face hard. Chi Rongji took 2 steps back and bumped into a chair on the side. Bitch, it's the first time for me to meet you after so long. How can I tell you about the evil Taoist of Baiyun Taoist Temple? Sister Yuru, I'm really sorry about this. It's really not my fault. I know it later. But the rumors have been spread. I can't do anything about it. You are already married, but I don't even have a marriage. Chi Rongji sobbed and covered her face with her hands. She struggled to stand still. You know it later. What's the matter? Chin Yuru could come out today because of Chi Rongji's invitation. The people of Duke Yang's mansion also wanted to know why Chi Rongji took Chin Yuru with her. If it was like before, how could Chin Yuru get out of the house so easily? Since marrying into Duke Yang's mansion, Chin Yuru had lost all her freedom. Even if old madam doted on her, Di Yan was also her favorite grandson. Moreover, the whole Duke Yang's mansion couldn't afford to lose face. She could marry into Duke Yang's mansion because of old madam, so how could she ask for more? It's all Xiao Wanru's fault. Chi Rongji said with hatred. She sat down in the chair again and picked up a handkerchief to cover her face. Her eyes were burning with hatred. This name seemed to be a little distant in Chin Yuru's memory. But suddenly, she broke the indifference she had for a long time. A bloodthirsty coldness slowly condensed in her eyes. She clenched her thin hands tightly and squeezed out a voice from between her teeth, "What does this bitch want to do again? Isn't it enough for her to make me like this?" She hated Xiao Wanru as much as her life in Duke Yong's mansion was miserable. She almost hated Xiao Wanru with all her venom. If it weren't for Xiao Wanru, Qin Yuru felt that she would go crazy. Yes, all her misfortunes were caused by that bitch. If she hadn't made such a scene in Jiangzhou, she and Qi Tianyu wouldn't have broken up, and she wouldn't have such a bad reputation. In the capital city, because of this bitch, she and her mother's plan was ruined step by step. All these were because of Xiao Wanru. Qin Yuru felt that all the pain in her life was caused by Xiao Wanru, but she didn't think about the vicious things she had done to Xiao Wanru. Every one of them was outrageous. After doing such a thing, she even asked others not to resist and let her die. Seeing the crazy hatred in Qin Yuru's eyes, Qi Rongji was satisfied. She came here today to arouse Qin Yuru's hatred. Although I don't live a good life in Duke Xing's mansion, it's not bad. Xiao Yuru is now living in Yuhui Nunnery, and it has nothing to do with me. But she deliberately said that it was you who told me this. When the matter of Baiyun Taoist Temple came out, she said so in front of the people of Duke Xing's mansion who went up the mountain. This matter spread to me and then to you. Later, although I refuted it, we are all people of Duke Xing's mansion. How could they be partial to me? Qi Rongji wiped her tears and said sadly. In fact, her words were not perfect, but because Qin Yuru had already hated Xiao Wanru to the core, she believed what she heard and thought it must be so. She didn't need Qi Rongji's explanation and immediately believed Qi Rongji's words. Bitch, bitch. Qin Yuru picked up the teacup beside her and smashed it on the ground angrily. Sitting opposite her, Qi Rongji raised the corners of her mouth sarcastically. Qin Yuru was still like this, so she was so miserable. Sister Yuru, we have been friends for many years. I just like to climb up the social ladder, and I don't have any bad intentions. Even if I did something wrong to you, it was Xiao Wanru's fault. Speaking of which, my current situation is also because of Xiao Wanru. Qi Rongji added fuel to the fire and made Qin Yuru angrier. What she said was very reasonable, and she also mentioned the intimate things between them in the past. Now Qi Rongji's situation was not good, so they could be said to be in the same boat now. In the end, Qi Rongji even said with some envy, Sister Yuru at least married into Duke Yong's mansion and became the young madam of Duke Yong's mansion. In the future, Duke Yong's mansion will belong to Sister Yuru, but now I have nothing. I don't know what will happen in the future. After saying that, she wiped the corners of her eyes sadly. The door opened, and Chun Yi came in with 2 wine pots and 2 empty wine glasses on the plate in her hand. After Chun Yi put down the wine, Qi Rongji picked up the wine in front of Qin Yuru and poured a glass for her, and also poured a glass for herself. Sister Yuru, Xiao Wanru is now the 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion. There is nothing we can do. Let's get drunk. Now the difference between us and her is the cloud. She is the cloud in the 9th heaven, and we, Qi Rongji snorted and drank up the wine in her hand. With tears falling down, she said in a choked voice, we are nothing. We are destined to be trampled under her feet for the rest of our lives. Qin Yuru also held the wine cup in her hand. After drinking up the wine, she smashed the cup in her hand heavily on the ground. She gritted her teeth and said with hatred, she is nothing now. It's not certain who will be the winner in the future. Chapter 601. You can't defeat her. Qi Rongji handed the other teacup in her hand to Qin Yuru for her to use as a wine cup. Then she filled her own cup and Qin Yuru's cup and said sadly. This bitch. Since she won't let me go, I won't let her go either. Either she dies or I die. Qin Yuru picked up the wine cup and drank it up again and said with hatred. She will come out of the Yuhui nunnery soon. In the future, you can't see her even if you want to. I heard that the consort selection of several princes is coming. With her identity, she is very likely to win the consort selection. At that time, she, a princess, and you, a young madam, are obviously lower than her. When you see her, you have to kneel down to greet her. Qi Rongji took a sip of wine and said, I won't let her get what she wants. I won't have a chance in the future, but I have a chance now. Since I am still in the Yuhui nunnery, I will have a lot of chances. Qin Yuru said in a sharp voice. In fact, you are right to think in this way. Let me tell you. Qi Rongji pulled her chair to Qin Yuru's side and said in a low voice. Qin Yuru's head also moved closer. A vicious smile slowly appeared on her gloomy face as she nodded her head. After Xiao Yanru left, Xiao Wanru's life was much calmer. She no longer had to worry that Xiao Yanru would suddenly make trouble here. She also lived in seclusion. Basically, she didn't appear in the eyes of others. The last batch of personnel of the Ministry of Justice also left. The Yuhui nunnery had been restored to its original appearance, and even the incense was more prosperous than before. Many people were curious about the place where the of the late emperor were imprisoned in the Yuhui nunnery. Some people secretly came to the back mountain of the Yuhui nunnery by offering incense. Although the nuns of the Yuhui nunnery forbade these pilgrims to go to the back, there were always some people who could sneak to the side of the high wall and look outside the high wall. Fortunately, there were people guarding the side door. Even if someone wanted to sneak in, it was impossible. After all, the nuns were not members of the Ministry of Justice. At most, they could persuade them to leave. If they really didn't follow the rules, they could do nothing about it. Moreover, the maple forest behind was newly developed. Many people might come here by appreciating the maple trees. The nuns in the Yuhui nunnery had no choice but to turn a blind eye to it. Fortunately, most of the pilgrims were well-mannered. After being persuaded or sneaking a glance, they didn't find anything different, so they lost their curiosity and wouldn't go there again. Apart from the high wall, there was nothing much to see, and it was impossible to enter. Those big and burly nuns were guarding the only side door on the high wall, and no one was allowed to approach. Under such circumstances, Xiao Wanru still had a guest, which really made her feel strange. Second miss. The old maid stepped forward and saluted, still using the old address. Who told you to come? Xiao Wanru looked the old maid up and down and recognized that she was a servant of the general's mansion. She couldn't help but put down the Buddha altar in her hand and asked in surprise. In the past 3 years, although there was occasional news from the Qin's mansion on the mountain, there was very little. Except that the news that Shui Rulan gave birth to a child was reported by the Qin's mansion, other news was inquired about by Xiao Wanru, and she had never sent someone for other things. She didn't know where they came from this time. Second miss, old madam is seriously ill. The old maid wiped her slightly red eyes and said. Grandma is ill? How could she be ill? Xiao Wanru said in surprise. It seems that she is sad, or maybe she is old. I don't know. I just said that old madam is seriously ill, and many doctors can't cure her for a while. So madam thought of you and wanted to ask you to go down the mountain to have a look. The old maid said. When? Xiao Wanru nodded and said. It would be best if I could go now. Xiao Wanru looked out of the window and found that it was already afternoon. If she went to the Qin's mansion to treat her grandma, she would definitely not come back today. If she couldn't come back, where would she go? She had to go back to her mansion after going down the mountain, but she didn't have a place to live in Xinghua in a hurry. She couldn't go back to her mansion and live in the guest room. Miss, it's not appropriate for you to go down the mountain. Ask old madam to come up the mountain later. Yu Jie advised. But old madam is seriously ill. The old maid hesitated and said uneasily. When I was in Jiangzhou, old madam would come to Jingxin Monastery every time she was seriously ill. What's more, Mingqiu Nun is on the mountain now. Yu Jie ignored the old maid and reminded Xiao Wanru. Although Xiao Wanru also had medical skills, she certainly couldn't be compared with Mingqiu Nun. Moreover, no one knew old madam's illness better than Mingqiu Nun. Go back now. If it's too late, ask old madam to come up the mountain today. If it's too late, ask her tomorrow. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and thought that Yujie's suggestion was good. Yes, second Mississippi. I'll go back now. The old maid looked at Yujie and then at Xiao Wanru. She seemed to be a little reluctant, but she had to agree. Yujie, see her out. Xiao Wanru ordered softly. Yujie nodded and saw the old maid out. She walked into the yard and looked at Qing, who was sweeping the floor again. The old maid rolled her eyes, pointed at Qing, with a smile, and said, Miss Yujie, you are second Mrs. Personal Maid. You don't have to see me out. Let this girl see me out. Ah. Yujie hesitated for a moment. Miss Yujie, you'd better go to serve second Mississippi. If you see me out, if second Miss needs something, you can't expect an inferior maid to help second Miss, can you? The old maid advised. Well, Qing, come here and see this nanny out. The old maid's words made sense. Yujie thought for a while and nodded. Okay. Qing, agreed, put down the broom in her hand, and ran over happily. At first glance, it could be seen that she was not a very smart maid. In terms of bearing, she was much worse than Yujie. The old maid was very satisfied. After saying goodbye to Yujie, she followed Qing, out. This is Miss Qing, right? As soon as they walked out of the courtyard, the old maid took a few steps forward with a smile, walked side by side with Qing, and greeted her with a smile. Yes, I'm Qing, Which mansion do you come from? Why do you want to see my master? Qing, asked curiously. She was in the yard just now, so she didn't know where the old maid came from. When the old maid came, she opened the door. After opening the door, she happened to see Yujie standing in the corridor. When the old maid saw Yujie, she called her Miss Yujie loudly, and then she was led in to see Mississippi. I'm here to see my second Mississippi. My old madam is ill. The old maid said with a sad face. Second Miss. My master is ranked fifth Mississippi. Qing, interrupted the old maid and corrected her. I know that my second Miss is ranked 5th Miss in Duke Xing's mansion now, but she has always been called second Miss before. The old maid hurriedly explained. But her words were interrupted by Qing, who looked serious. That was in the past. Now no matter who it is, you have to call my master 5th Miss, or it will be messy. I know, but you have to call my master 5th Mississippi, otherwise, both Duke Xing's mansion and Great Elder Princess's mansion will be angry. Maybe they will ask who is calling her by her original title in the end. Qing, interrupted the old maid rudely again, and looked a little angry. If you can't make it clear again, I won't see you off. After saying that, she stopped, as if she didn't want to leave anymore. Okay, I was wrong. 5th Miss, it's 5th Miss. The old maid hurriedly changed the way she addressed her. Qing showed a satisfied look at this time and moved her feet again. You are the former servant of my 5th Miss, so you are a member of Qing's mansion? I heard that Madam and old Madam of Qing's mansion are very kind to my master. I wonder if you were sent by Madam or old Madam? The young girl's temper came and went quickly. When she heard the old maid changed the way she addressed her, she showed a complacent smile, which made the old maid on the side despise her secretly. She is really a little girl. She even quarreled with me for a title. However, such a person was easy to coax, and it was more convenient for her to inquire about something. She was much better than the shrewd Yujie. I was sent by Madame Shui. Old Madam is sick. Madame Shui remembered that second 5th Miss had treated old Madam before, so she specially asked me to invite 5th Miss down the mountain, but 5th Miss is unwilling. The old maid sighed and said with her face darkening, Old Madam is sick, but she still asked old Madam to come up the mountain by herself. But, is old Madam our master's former grandmother? Qing widened her eyes and became more and more curious. Xiao Wanru's return to her family was also a legend in the capital city, and many people knew it. One of the main reasons was that Xiao Wanru's real identity was very noble, and it was related to the bloodline of the eldest princess of the royal family. Although Qing was a little servant girl, she also knew something about this sensational matter. Yes, our old madam is second. Fifth Miss's former grandmother. She has raised Fifth Miss since she was a child and is very kind to Fifth Mississippi. But now she is sick. Why is it so difficult for her to see Fifth Miss? The old maid sighed with emotion. As she spoke, her eyes turned red, and she wiped the corners of her eyes with her sleeve. Qing rolled her eyes and nodded very honestly. Our master is now the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Duke Xing's mansion has the most rules, so she can't make any mistakes. Now she is observing mourning for the heir and infanta, so she can't see anyone casually. But our old madam is seriously ill. The old maid thought that this servant girl was really a weirdo. She was stunned to see her say these words as if they were natural. Was this servant girl's brain made of stone? She couldn't even understand good words and bad words. Anyway, she has been sick for several days, so it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2 days later. She can come up the mountain tomorrow and ask the nun in the nunnery to take a look at her. Then she will be cured. Qing still looked careless and didn't understand the situation. In fact, I saw it just now. Second. Fifth Miss also wants to go down the mountain to see old madam. Old madam is old, and this illness is not a trivial matter. The old maid thought that she didn't have to be so tactful. This girl didn't understand words. If she said it in a tactful way, it would be like playing the lute to a cow. Chapter 602. Now at the foot of the mountain. The old maid said with a sigh. She really wanted to say something, but she didn't know where to start at the moment, so she just mentioned it. However, this kind of hesitant look was the most attractive. Qing was just an insensible and rough servant girl, so how could she restrain herself? She immediately looked at her master anxiously and asked, "Nanny, what happened at the foot of the mountain? Is it related to my master? What's going on? Tell me." "I can't say anything about it." The old maid shook her head and said helplessly. After saying that, she closed her mouth tightly, as if she wouldn't say anything no matter how Qing asked. It made Qing scratch her ears and cheeks uncomfortably. She begged and expressed that she was tight-lipped. Moreover, she repeatedly made it clear that she just wanted to listen and would not say anything. The old maid finally changed her expression. She looked around and found that there was no one around. Then she took Qing to hide behind a tree and said in a low voice, "People outside say that second Fifth Miss is ungrateful." She said that she went up the mountain to observe mourning for the fifth miss for 3 years. It's obvious that she stepped on a high branch and ignored Madame Dowager who raised the fifth Mississippi. How could it be possible? My master went up the mountain to observe mourning for the heir and infanta. Qing was furious. I also know that it's reasonable, but people outside don't say so. Do you know why our Madame Dowager suddenly fell ill? The old maid smacked her lips and said. Why? Qing increasingly wanted to find out more. At the banquet, the madams and old madams of other mansions said that the fifth miss is ungrateful. They said that Madame Dowager raised the fifth miss like a white wolf. Even if Madame Dowager fell ill, the fifth miss would not go down the mountain to see her. I came to invite the fifth miss this time, saying that Madame Dowager fell ill, but in fact, many madams of other mansions are watching her. If the fifth miss is not careful, I'm afraid, the old maid sighed. After taking a deep breath, he pulled Qing out and said, "Forget it. These are the fifth miss's private affairs. Even if Madame Dowager is ridiculed by all the madams in the future, it has nothing to do with us servants. The fifth miss is now the miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Even if her reputation is ruined, she can get married in the future." Hey, what are you talking about? Even if our miss has a bad reputation, she can still get married. Qing was unhappy. She stood still and dragged the old maid, refusing to leave. Okay, it's my fault, but it really has nothing to do with me. I'm just a servant girl who wants to pass on a message. Let's go. I've seen the 5th Mississippi. It's fine if the 5th Miss doesn't want to go down the mountain, but those madams and old madams who associate with Madame Dowager are not as noble as Duke Xing's mansion. If they have something to say, just let them say it. The old maid looked like she didn't want to make trouble. She pulled Qing hard and wanted to go out. However, Qing didn't leave. Not only did she not leave, but she also turned around and pulled the old maid back. Let's go. Let's go to see the 5th Miss and make it clear to her that their status is not as noble as Duke Xing's mansion. No matter what, we can't let them gossip about our miss. Qing said angrily. Miss Qing, you'd better not be so concerned. We are just servants. What can we do? It's our master who has the final say. Didn't the 5th Miss just say that she will invite Madame Dowager up the mountain tomorrow? Let's go now and don't make trouble. The old maid didn't want to leave, but she was not as strong as Qing. She was pulled back and shouted anxiously. You didn't say that many madams and old madams ridiculed Madame Dowager of General Qin's mansion. Miss respects old Madame Qin the most and won't let old Madame Qin be gossiped about. Qing said angrily. She felt that she was defending the reputation of her miss and old Madame Qin and doing something that satisfied her Mississippi. I am also afraid of making trouble. I will say what Madame told me. Anyway, these things have nothing to do with us as servants. Why do you take it so seriously? The old maid pretended that she didn't want to go back and kept persuading Qing, but her feet were still pulled back by Qing, The two of them came back while pulling and pulling. Yujie happened to be in the corridor. Seeing them pulling and pulling back, she walked over with a surprised look. Sister Yujie, keep an eye on her. I have something important to report to the 5th Miss. Qing said angrily and looked so tired that her face and neck turned red. Along the way, even though the old maid was cooperative, she was so tired that she was panting heavily. Okay. Then you can go in. Chu Lu is inside. Ask her to report to the 5th Miss. Yujie looked at the old maid and nodded. Qing wiped the sweat on her head and hurried to the silence room. Hearing the sound outside, Chu Lu, who was in the silence room, also came out and stopped when she saw Qing. Sister Chu Lu, I have something important to report to the 5th Miss. Qing said anxiously. Seeing that she was so tired that her face was red, Chu Lu went in to report. After a while, she let Qing in. Qing's voice came from inside. She was very angry and a little loud. She was talking about what she had heard from the old maid just now. The old maid strained her ears in the yard and heard it clearly. But even if she strained her ears, she couldn't hear Xiao Wanru's voice clearly. Yujie was standing beside her, so she couldn't walk over even if she wanted to, so she could only stand in the yard with a hollow smile. Qing didn't stay in the room for long. After a while, she came out angrily and said to the old maid, Don't leave now. Go down the mountain with us. Our miss will go down the mountain to see old Madame Qin. How can we let those who look down on old Madame Qin gossip? We can't let them ruin Miss's reputation. The 5th Miss is going to go down the mountain to see old Madame Qin. The old maid said in astonishment. Yes, I'm going now. Qing said proudly. But now, it's a little late. 5th Miss, you'd better stay in Qin's mansion when you go down the mountain. Old Madame hasn't seen you for a long time. The old maid said with great joy. Well, Miss will arrange it. Qing couldn't answer at the moment, so she just said vaguely. No, I have to tell old Madam so that she can be happy and prepare a courtyard for the 5th Mississippi. For so many years, no matter how much old Madam misses the 5th Miss, she doesn't dare to go up the mountain to invite the 5th Miss. The old maid wiped her tears excitedly, turned around and ran out. She couldn't catch up with her even if she wanted to. In the yard, Yujie and Qing didn't chase after her. After standing calmly for a while, Qing said, "I'll go outside to prepare a carriage for the miss." "Okay." Yujie nodded knowingly and turned back to the silence room. In the silence room, Chulu had helped Xiao Wanru freshen up and put on new clothes. It was not the black clothes she had always worn in the Yuhui nunnery, nor her own clothes, but a set of Chu Li's clothes. Chu Lu was a servant girl, but because she was a servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion, in order to show that Xiao Wanru valued Duke Xing's mansion, when the servants in the mansion made clothes in the past years, they would also send someone to make new clothes for Yujie and Chu Lu, but the material was used by ordinary servants. Xiao Wanru's clothes were the ones that Chu Lu had never worn before. Now Xiao Wanru put them on, and they were almost the same size. She combed her hair into two simple buns and pinned them with a hairpin. Looking at her appearance, everyone would think that she was just a servant girl of a mansion. "Let's go." Xiao Wanru stood up, pulled her lapel and said, "Miss, if you really go down the mountain like this, it will be dangerous at this time." Yujie looked at the sky outside the window uneasily. The sun was setting in the west. Although it was possible to go down the mountain at this time, it would be dark soon. It might not be safe on the road. If there were pilgrims in the Yuhui nunnery who wanted to go back, they had basically gone back at this time. "It doesn't matter. I'll go down and have a look, but I won't take our carriage," Xiao Wanru said with a slight smile. It seemed that Xiao Yenru had made a big plan to trick her down the mountain after spending so much effort. It seemed that Qin Yuru, who could make use of the people of the Qin's mansion, took action again. 3 years ago, Xiao Yenru didn't kill her for the sake of old Madame Qin and Qin Huayong. Now she wanted to be restless again. Xiao Yenru was good at provoking Qin Yuru to take action. Then she would show Xiao Yenru what it meant to be bitten by a snake. Qin Yuru was also a hot-tempered viper, who couldn't be controlled by anyone. "Yujie, go and tell Mingqiu Nun to borrow the carriage she used to go down the mountain," Xiao Wanru ordered. Mingqiu Nun had to go down the mountain from time to time to treat Chu Luchen, so the Yuhui nunnery gave her a carriage. Although it was not big, it was very light and easy to use. "Yes, I'll go now." Yujie nodded, but stopped after a few steps. "Miss, we need a coachman." In the past, when Mingqiu Nun went down the mountain, there would be a nun in the Yuhui nunnery who could drive the carriage. But now it was not convenient to ask the nun in the Yuhui nunnery to drive the carriage. "It doesn't matter. Qing can drive the carriage." And this time she didn't ask her to drive our carriage, but our carriage. "The coachman of my maternal grandma's family will drive the carriage of the Yuhui nunnery." Xiao Wanru arranged the arrangement unhurriedly. Qing was naturally not an ordinary servant girl. She had asked her just now and knew that she could drive the carriage. The coachman appointed by her maternal grandma was also a trustworthy person. At that time, because the coachman of Duke Xing's mansion couldn't be trusted, her maternal grandma played a trick and drove the coachman away. Hearing that her miss had arranged everything properly, Yujie calmed down and turned to borrow the carriage from Mingqiu Nun. Xiao Wanru took Chu Lu to tidy up a little and then walked out of the Yuhui nunnery. When they arrived at the parking place, Yujie had already borrowed the carriage and waited there early. Qing sat on the shaft of her carriage, while the coachman of Rui and great elder princess sat on the shaft of the carriage borrowed from Mingqiu Nun. Xiao Wanru asked Chu Lu to go back and asked her to stay here to keep an eye on them. She only took Yujie to get on Mingqiu Nun's ordinary carriage. Qing drove an empty carriage and walked slowly in front of them. The two carriages left the side door of the Yuhui nunnery one after the other, and then went down the mountain around the mountain road. The old maid of Qin's mansion had already disappeared. Chapter 603. The carriage driven by Qing went all the way forward, and Xiao Wanru's carriage followed behind. Both carriages drove very slowly. The mountain road was winding. At this time, the sun had gone down. Under the cover of trees and bushes, they had to be more careful. It had rained heavily yesterday. Today's sun was not strong enough, and the ground was still very wet and slippery. They couldn't make any mistakes on the mountain road. Qing's carriage drove very steadily, and she became more and more careful at the turn. Miss had specially reminded her before, which meant that it would not be a smooth journey. All the way down the mountain, although there were some pulleys, there was basically no mistake. After the last turn, they would reach the flat ground at the foot of the mountain. Qing unconsciously breathed a sigh of relief and looked around. It was getting dark, but it was not the time to light the lamps. The mountain road was about to end. After the turn, they could go back to the capital city smoothly. Anyone would be careless at this time. From Qing's angle, she could see voices coming from the flat intersection below. There was a tea house at the intersection. Those who had been to the Yuhui nunnery knew about it. Qing had gone up and down the mountain a few times, so she certainly knew it clearly. There were voices and laughter. In addition, the mountain road was about to end, so people would naturally feel lazy. Even the most experienced coachman would let out a sigh of relief and relax at this time. But something strange happened at this time. The horse pulling the carriage suddenly ran. The corner was right in front of them. Qing's face changed greatly. She suddenly pulled the reins in her hand and quickly fell to the side. The distance of dozens of feet was covered in the blink of an eye. If Qing hadn't been prepared, she would not have been able to escape, let alone the person in the closed carriage door. The horse took the carriage over the small cliff at the corner. The loud noise had already alerted the people in the tea house down the road. Many people ran out and were stunned to see the carriage tumbling down. Each of them widened their eyes and sucked in a breath of cold air in fright. They couldn't even say a word. "Hurry up, hurry up. There is a pool down there. Hurry up and save people." Someone who knew the terrain shouted. Because this was the last bend in the mountain pass, many people would look over here when they had nothing to do. Even those who were drinking tea at the tea house below would take a detour to enjoy the scenery. At the bottom of the cliff was a lake. If the pedestrians fell from here, they would not die. The water could stop them from falling. However, they had fallen with the carriage. The autumn weather was still very cool at night. Translator, Nyoibo Studio Editor, Nyoibo Studio. If someone was locked in the car and fell down, they would die without a doubt. It will take an hour to get there from here. How can we make it in time? Someone came to his senses and sighed, I wonder whose carriage it is. Why didn't they see the road clearly and just rush down like that? That's right. Those who know how to swim should go and take a look. Even if they can't save the person, it's still a good deed to be able to collect the corpse. Someone else said. He was right. Someone had already turned around from the back of the road. There is a servant girl over there. She seems to have fallen from the carriage. A sharp-eyed person saw Qing jump down from the carriage and shouted loudly. A few more people ran over, and someone helped Qing who was still lying on the ground. Seeing that the servant girl was just injured and was actually fine, they all said loudly that the servant girl was lucky. Which mansion are you from? Who was in the carriage just now? Someone saw that Qing could still sit up and speak, and asked with concern. Our miss is the 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Qing said with a pale face, covering her arm. The 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion. The person who asked the question and the others looked at each other. They had heard of the reputation of the 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Wasn't the Bane, who caused a stir in the city a few days ago and was later suppressed by force, the 5th miss of Duke Xing's mansion? An old maid squeezed in from outside the crowd. When she saw Qing's face, she was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect that this girl was so lucky. The whole carriage had overturned. It was really surprising that this girl was still alive. Qing Miss Qing is that you? She rolled her eyes. After a while, the old maid had rushed in, grabbed Qing's hand, and said excitedly, just now the one who overturned the carriage was it the second miss? Even if this girl didn't die, so what? She was just an inferior servant girl. Maybe she didn't even get into the carriage just now and could only sit on the shaft of the carriage with the coachman, so she escaped the disaster. It was good that a servant girl didn't die. They could push the blame to Qin's mansion. You are. Qin had already been helped to sit down in the tea house below. Someone poured a cup of tea for her. She took a sip and recovered, but her face was still pale, and her whole body was trembling. Obviously, this servant girl was scared out of her wits. In fact, even a man would be frightened by this kind of thing, let alone a little servant girl. The carriage had overturned in front of them. Needless to say, this little servant girl was the only one alive now. I'm old Madam Qin's servant. When I came up to the mountain, I heard that old Madam Qin was ill, so second miss went down the mountain. I didn't expect that second miss would have an accident when I just took a short rest here. Now, what should we do? If old Madam knows that second miss has an accident, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that she will lose her life. The old maid wiped away her tears and squatted in front of Qing, looking extremely flustered. Her words made the cause and effect of the matter clear. Many people were just surprised why the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion went down the mountain at this time. It had rained yesterday, and the mountain road was rugged and slippery. Now it was dusk. Who would go down the mountain like this? But it turned out that there was another reason. This miss did this because she was worried about her grandmother's illness. She was a filial daughter. Someone sighed and felt that this young lady was truly a kind person. However, a beautiful woman's life was very short. Could it be that this star of misfortune didn't bring harm to others, but to herself? Did the first miss send you here? Qing said with difficulty, and her eyes looked a little dull. After experiencing what had happened just now, it was normal for her to be frightened and dull. I don't. The old maid rolled her eyes and didn't know who Qing was talking about for a moment. Of course, her master was Qin Yuru on the surface, but in fact, she had been bribed by Xiao Yenru in private. First Miss. First Miss Xiao. First Miss Qin. Qing turned her head with difficulty and looked at the old maid eagerly with tears falling from her eyes. Her face was as pale as snow. Why did you do this to my master? Her words made no sense, but the old maid panicked. How could the first Miss Xiao be exposed? It's our first miss, not the first Miss Xiao. It has nothing to do with the first Miss Xiao. The old maid reached out to take Qing's hand and explained in a low voice while comforting her. It's the first Miss Xiao. It must be the first Miss Xiao. She didn't like my master before. The carriage was tampered with, and the horse suddenly ran away just now. Only people from Duke Xing's mansion could do it. Qing stared at the old maid blankly, and it was obvious that she was in a daze. The people around all stopped talking and looked at Qing and the old maid in astonishment. It's not the first Miss Xiao, but the first Miss Qin. The old maid began to sweat on her forehead. She reached out to pinch Qing's hand hard and said anxiously. If the first Miss Xiao knew it, she would be in serious trouble. It's the first Miss Xiao. It's the first Miss Xiao who can't tolerate my master. Qing burst into tears and screamed. She struggled to break free from the old maid's hand. Her hands immediately appeared in front of everyone. It turned out that the old maid had pinched her hands hard just now. It was obvious that there was something fishy about it. Come on, arrest this old maid. Someone suddenly shouted. The onlookers hurriedly retreated, only to see several yamen runners rush over and hold the old maid down. Why do you want to arrest me? The old maid was so shocked that she screamed anxiously. She could have left after saying a few specious words. The first Miss Xiao had prepared enough money for her, so that no one could find her after she left the capital city. She had never expected that there would be yamen runners in this place and at this time. It's the first Miss Xiao's servant. She deliberately deceived Miss to go up the mountain. She did it on purpose. Ching said blankly. She stared at the old maid, suddenly stood up, suddenly rushed out, and screamed, Miss, stop her. The leading yamen runner said. Immediately, 2 more people came to stop Ching, who was almost crazy. Let's go to the back and have a look. Maybe this miss is still alive. After stopping the old maid and Ching, the leading yamen runner waved his hand, and the crowd turned to the back. On the mountain road, Xiao Wanru's carriage was empty, but Xiao Wanru and Yujie were not there. Xiao Yenru sat in her room, looked at the dim sky outside the window, and raised the corners of her mouth with a smile. There was a trace of elegance in her leisurely look, which was the feeling she gave people in the past. Miss, something must have happened now. Shuchi looked out of the window and said with a smile, no one will go against you in the future. Is there anyone? Xiao Yenru leaned back with a bit of laziness and comfort. Her eyes curved, and the corners of her mouth overflowed with a smile. Of course there is no one. How can the 5th miss compare with you? Something happened because of the Qin's mansion. No matter how they investigate, they can't find out that it's us. Shuchi rolled her eyes and flattered her with a smile. She had also lived a very sullen life in the Yuhui nunnery for a period of time. At this time, she inexplicably felt relieved. Both the 5th miss and the 2 maids around her put a lot of pressure on Shuchi. Something happened to the Qin's mansion. Qin Yuru has always been at odds with her. Qin Yuru's current situation is caused by Xiao Wanru, and it has nothing to do with us. Xiao Yenru said with a smile, which became more and more pleasant. She looked calm and indifferent, as if she had nothing to do with anything. A maid ran in a hurry. When she entered the door, she accidentally fell, but she still stood up in a hurry and rushed to the main room. Chapter 604. First Miss, Bad News, Bad News. Moyen rushed in, looked at Xiao Yenru in the room in a panic, and said with a pale face. What's there to make a fuss about? Are my maids so immature? Xiao Yenru said coldly with her smiling face turning cold. However, she had a bad hunch in her heart. She had just picked up the teacup but did not drink it immediately. Moyen was her confidant, who could stand up to anything. She had never been so flustered. There was a big stain on the knee of her dress, which showed that she had fallen before. First Miss, something happened. The old maid was caught. Moyen took a deep breath and said. What old maid? Xiao Yenru said casually, but her face changed dramatically after saying that. She suddenly stood up and said with a gloomy face, what happened? It was said that the 5th miss was tricked out of the carriage, and something happened in the carriage. However, a servant girl named Qing survived and jumped out of the carriage luckily. Then she insisted that it was the 1st miss who sent the old maid to do it. The old maid panicked and pinched the servant girl's hand, but someone saw it. It happened that a pair of people from the capital governor's office went to the foot of the Yuhui nunnery to investigate the case and took the old maid away. Moyen nervously wiped off the cold sweat on his face, and eloquently told him the whole story. The old maid didn't escape. Why was she caught there? Shuchi also panicked and asked anxiously. I don't know what happened. I gave the old maid a lot of money and asked her to go far away, but she didn't escape and was caught. What should the 1st miss do now? If she betrays me, I'll be dead. Moyen cried out of fear. It was Moyen who went to bribe the old maid. How could Moyen not panic at this time? Did you go there alone? Xiao Yenru put the teacup in her hand heavily on the table with an ugly face. She thought for a while and asked. No, not alone. Moyen hurriedly shook her head and said with a flushed face, there was an old maid with me. I was afraid that the old maid would do something bad, so I followed her. Is the old maid there? Xiao Yenru asked with a cold face. Yes, she is. Moyen said. Find an excuse to say that she stole something from my mother's yard and beat her to death. Xiao Yenru closed her eyes gloomily and opened them with a fierce look. Yes, Mississippi. I'll have someone do it right away. Moyen said in a hurry and turned to run out in a panic, but Xiao Yenru stopped her with a sullen face. Shuqi, I still have something to ask you. Yes, Mississippi. I have something to ask you. Shuqi pulled herself together and said. As Xiao Yenru's maid, she could do this kind of thing with ease. She turned around, answered, and walked out. Of course, this old maid couldn't be kept alive. Otherwise, when the investigation reached the mansion, something might happen. The old maid couldn't be it. She. Qin and Qin yu Shi and Yen. She could yu Shi. She was even couldn't. She. Even, she couldn't she, not. And. It would be inappropriate if the two of them met. She couldn't even let others know that she was involved in it. It's from the Ministry of Justice. Lord Chiu Yu sent a servant here. He said that the matter had been reported to the Ministry of Justice. The people involved are not the ones who can be dealt with by the capital governor, so we have to let the Ministry of Justice handle it. Moyen was so anxious that she was about to cry. If it was just the capital governor, it would be easy to handle. But if it was the Ministry of Justice, it would be a big deal. Even though the old maid who went with her had been dealt with, she was still very timid, afraid that she would really get involved. Others didn't know what kind of person her master was, but she knew it. If it really came to that, she might not even be able to keep her life. Chiu Yu. Xiao Yenru said with a frown. She really didn't want to have too much to do with Chiu Yu. She knew clearly what Chiu Yu thought of her. She was afraid that he would do it too deliberately so that it would get out of hand in the future. She had heard of many cases of people who were infatuated but actually made mistakes in their work. But now she had to make use of Chiu Yu. Is the person still waiting outside? Xiao Yenru took a deep breath and made up her mind. No matter what, she had to know it first. Yes. He's still waiting outside the back door, Moyen said in a panic. Xiao Yenru nodded, walked to the desk, picked up the writing brush and ink, thought for a while, and then wrote a sentence. When the ink was a little dry, she folded the paper, put it into a blank envelope, and said, "Give this letter to the manservant who delivered the message." Yes, Mississippi, rest assured. I'll do it right away. Moyen took the letter and hurriedly promised. Then she pulled herself together and walked out of Xiao Yenru's room. An old maid of Duke Xing's mansion stole Madame of Duke Xing's hairpin. After being found out, she insisted that she didn't steal it. Later, when there were witnesses and material evidence, she cried and begged for mercy from Madame of Duke Xing. Madame of Duke Xing hated her for quibbling before, so she directly ordered someone to beat her to death. This matter made all the servants of Duke Xing's mansion tremble with fear all night, and they all felt that the old maid's wailing seemed to be in the air. In the past, there had been masters who ordered the servants to be punished, but they basically did it in secret. This time, they specially asked many servants to watch the punishment. The servants went back in fear. All of them felt that there seemed to be ghosts in the dim light, and they became more and more frightened and guilty. When they returned to their residence, they settled down early. No one noticed that when most of the people in the courtyard were asked to watch the punishment, Xiao Yenru left her courtyard with her servant girl, went out from the back door, got on a carriage at the door, and then the carriage left Duke Xing's mansion. The carriage didn't go to the main street all the way, but basically went through deserted alleys. Fortunately, the coachman was familiar with the road, so he didn't go the wrong way even in the dark. The oil-walled carriage went all the way to the front of a restaurant. The business of the restaurant was good. At this time, there were many people coming and going, and there were a lot of guests. Seeing two women coming down, the waiter hurriedly came up to them with a smile. The servant girl stood in front of Xiao Yenru, who was tightly wrapped in a cloak, and said the name of a private room. The waiter answered with a smile, shouted, and led the way enthusiastically in front of them. He led them to the second floor, and then turned inside and pushed open the door of a private room inside. When the door was opened, Chiu Yu stood there with an excited face, and his eyes fell on Xiao Yenru, who was tightly wrapped in a cloak. He had thought that he just ran over to deliver a letter, but he didn't expect that the woman he liked would meet him. This unexpected joy made it difficult for Chiu Yu to calm down until now. His face was slightly red, and his eyes were nervous. The servant girl waved her hand and asked the waiter to leave. The waiter saw it and left with a smile, and deliberately closed the door for them. At first glance, he knew that the man and the woman were not good people. Although the man didn't hide it at all, when he saw the woman's excited face blush when she appeared, he could tell that the relationship between them was not ordinary. In addition, the woman was tightly wrapped, and it was obvious that she was afraid to see others. However, this kind of situation was not rare to the waiter. The situation of a man and a woman meeting in private was really nothing to them. They were businessmen, so they didn't care about this kind of thing, as long as they could make money. At this time, the waiter was afraid that the man and woman were here for a secret meeting again. After going out, the waiter deliberately winked at a waiter at the staircase. The waiter immediately understood, looked curiously at the door from which the waiter had just come out, and nodded with a smile knowingly. In fact, such a guest was easier to deal with than other guests, and he was more generous. Didn't the restaurant need such a guest? The wine and dishes in the restaurant had been ordered, but when he saw Xiao Yenru take off the cloak on her head, Chiu Yu still handed over the menu at hand and said, "First miss, see if there's anything else you want to eat. After ordering, ask them to serve together." "I don't care." Xiao Yenru's mind was not on eating at this time, but it was inappropriate for her to show an anxious look, so she said with a smile, "How can you order? It's rare to invite the first Mississippi. First miss, you'd better do me the honor and order 1 or 2 dishes." How could Chiu Yu let his beauty down? He handed over the menu and looked as if he would waste time if Xiao Yenru didn't order, which really made Xiao Yenru unhappy. She still needed Chiu Yu's help. Even if she didn't like it, she could only suppress her temper, order a few dishes casually, and then sit down again. Chiu Yu looked at the dishes she ordered, secretly remembered them, and asked the waiter to take them out and asked the waiter to serve the dishes. After sitting down, he picked up the teapot and poured a cup of tea for Xiao Yenru. With a smile on his face, he pushed the tea to Xiao Yenru, and his eyes became increasingly scorching. "First Miss Xiao, please have some tea." The first Miss Xiao in front of him was really pleasing to the eye. "Your Excellency, I want to ask why I was involved in what happened today. Is it possible that someone dislikes our Duke Xing's mansion?" Xiao Yenru was really not in the mood to chat with him. After taking the tea, she took a sip, raised her head after a moment of silence, and said with a gentle face. Because she was anxious, sad, and even a little angry, it made her look pitiful and heart-wrenching. Chiu Yu felt very distressed and wanted to reach out to touch her and comfort her, but he knew that if he did so at this time, it would be rude. He secretly rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he got the news and immediately sent it to the first Miss Xiao. Otherwise, when everyone knew it tomorrow, he would have nothing to do with it, and the first Miss Xiao would not have specially asked him to meet. The time and place were all chosen by the first Miss Xiao, which showed her urgency to see him. The first Miss Xiao should also like him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have met him in private at night. Thinking of this, Chiu Yu's eyes became more and more affectionate. "Don't worry, I will always protect you. This matter is just a statement now, and the specifics will depend on the situation tomorrow. This matter has nothing to do with you, so it shouldn't involve you. It's just that the servant girl went crazy and talked nonsense. You don't have to take it to heart." Chiu Yu comforted Xiao Yenru in a soft voice. Chapter 605. Your Excellency, please tell me. Xiao Yenru lowered her eyes and said softly. Although she said it as a request, her expression was quite dignified, which made Chiu Yu feel that the woman who could move his heart really lived up to her good reputation of being dignified and decent. Even if they got along in private, she was a rare good girl, so he did not embarrass Xiao Yenru and told her everything. Of course, it began with the 5th Miss of Duke Xing's mansion hurriedly going down the mountain. At the last corner, she slid down the cliff with the carriage in front of everyone. Only a servant girl jumped out of the carriage and escaped. However, when everyone turned to the lake under the cliff, they found that there was no one in the carriage and the fifth Miss Xiao was missing. Later, someone found the master and the servant girl on an old tree above the lake. They should have been hung on the tree when they jumped out of the carriage. Fortunately, they just fainted there and were fine. This was discovered by the capital governor's people in advance. It happened that the capital governor's people went to the Yuhui nunnery to catch a villain. They failed to catch the villain and found such a case, which was related to Duke Xing's mansion. According to the frightened servant girl, it was the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion who framed the fifth Mississippi. The capital governor felt that he couldn't handle this kind of thing, so he immediately reported it to the Ministry of Justice and immediately filed a case in the Ministry of Justice. As for the fifth Miss Xiao, who had narrowly escaped death, she was taken away by Rui, an great elder princess, who came here after hearing the report. After hearing Qiu Yu's story, Xiao Yanru's face turned a little blue under the lamp. She was really surprised that Xiao Wanru didn't die in this situation. She pulled the handkerchief in her hand hard twice to hide the viciousness in her eyes. Xiao Wanru was really lucky. Isn't the Ministry of Justice in charge of some major cases? Now the fifth sister is fine. Why did you report it to the Ministry of Justice? After thinking for a while, Xiao Yanru raised her head and asked. Originally, it wasn't a big deal, but the one who reported the case said that this matter was related to your mansion, and someone almost died. If it wasn't for the luck of the fifth young lady, she would have lost her life this time. The fifth young lady's identity is also noble, and she is of royal blood. Qiu Yu said casually. She pulled the handkerchief in her hand harder secretly. Noble? It was really unpleasant to hear that a girl who was raised outside should talk to her about noble identity. Everyone knew that the eldest lineal daughter in the mansion was much more noble than other misses. Why Xiao Wanru was the noble one in Duke Xing's mansion? But now it was not the time to care about this. Xiao Yanru stood up, bowed deeply to Qiu Yu, and said, "Thank you, Your Excellency. I have to report it to my father and grandmother after I go back. After such a thing happened, I have to ask my father to find out who intended to harm our Duke Xing's mansion." Xiao Yanru Qiu Xiao Wanru Ming was Duke Mansion in Duke's Duke. Duke was, Duke King Mansion was, and Duke. Qiu yelled and said, "Miss Duke, first Miss Ming King, Shan, Duke. Qiu said. Xiao. But, she, Yanu, and Qiu, King. Su, Duke to. You. Qiu Yu reached out and stopped Xiao Yanru with a smile. His eyes were full of affection. He finally had a chance to meet Xiao Yanru in private. How could he let her leave so easily? The door opened, and the waiter came in with the dishes. He glanced at the two of them with a smile. The two of them were very close to each other. Qiu Yu stopped Xiao Yanru with his hand outstretched. From the waiter's perspective, it seemed that they were holding hands. Xiao Yanru was indeed not a decent girl. It was a waste of her beauty. The waiter put the dishes on the table and left with a smile. Seeing the waiter come in, Xiao Yanru stepped back and subconsciously avoided Qiu Yu. Qiu Yu didn't chase after her and stepped aside uncomfortably. After the waiter left, he invited Xiao Yanru to take a seat again. It was an autumn day. It was a little stuffy with the windows closed, but it was cool with the windows open. Outside the restaurant was the street view, which was also very beautiful at night. The windows were raised high, and the shadows of the windows could be vaguely seen. Opposite the restaurant was a jewelry store with 2 floors. There was a place for guests to rest on the second floor. Several misses were talking about jewelry. Someone looked out of the window and said in surprise, "Is it the first Miss Xiao opposite?" They looked out of the window, and the light was on, so they could see her clearly. However, they could only see the side of her face, so they couldn't tell who she was at the moment. It seems so. I think so too. Hearing that it was about Xiao Yanru, the other 2 misses also became interested and came over. Although they were not close friends with Xiao Wanru, they had seen the first Miss Xiao, who was considered the first beauty in the capital, from a distance. Who is that man? Is he the first young master Xiao? They turned their attention from Xiao Yanru to Qiu Yu. No, the first young master Xiao doesn't look like this. I don't think so. The man is so attentive to the woman opposite him and wants to pick up every dish. They don't look like brother and sister at all. Another miss said. However, they only saw the side of the man and just felt that he didn't look like the first young master Xiao. The misses became interested. They all leaned on the windowsill and pointed at the window of the opposite restaurant, guessing whether it was the first Miss Xiao and who the man was. Their actions finally alarmed Xiao Yanru. She raised her head and gave a hint to the maid, who hurriedly stepped forward and drew the curtain. At the window opposite, the misses who were watching the bustle sighed helplessly and sat down again. Although they couldn't see it, it didn't prevent them from continuing to discuss. The famous first Miss Xiao was meeting a man in private. This was really big news, but was it true or not? They couldn't be sure, but it looked like the man. In the opposite room, Xiao Yanru stood up and said goodbye. This time, Qiu Yu didn't stop her, but said that if there was any news, he would inform Xiao Yanru immediately and asked her to rest assured. After thanking him politely, Xiao Yanru wrapped herself up tightly and went downstairs with her maid. The waiter at the stairway hurriedly took 2 steps back and made way for her, while saying politely, "Miss, please have a safe trip. Please come again next time." Xiao Yanru nodded and hurriedly went downstairs with her maid. Unexpectedly, there were several strong men at the bottom of the stairs, who seemed to have drunk some wine. 4 or 5 people blocked the stairway, staggered up, and occupied the entire stairway. Xiao Yanru leaned against the handrail and made way for them, intending to go downstairs after they left. The 4 drunkards swayed their arms and came up. One of them walked to Xiao Yanru's side. Somehow, he bumped into Xiao Yanru, making her lose her balance and almost fall down the stairs. The drunkard reacted quickly and grabbed Xiao Yanru's arm to prevent her from rolling down the stairs. This beauty, I saved you. Why don't you let me see what you look like?" The drunkard reached out to pull Xiao Yanru's cloak. "How dare you?" The maid behind Xiao Yanru was anxious. She squeezed in front of Xiao Yanru, blocked her, and rebuked him angrily. What's wrong? I saved her just now, why do you turn your back on me?" Although the drunkard didn't seem to be sober, he grabbed Xiao Yanru's cloak and refused to let go, as if he would not recognize her until he saw her face. "How dare you? If you dare to touch my miss, you'll lose your hand," the maid said sternly. Although Xiao Yanru's maids were not Shuqi and Moyan, her closest servants, they were her trusted second-class maid, Yan Xiao. Xiao Yanru chose Yan Xiao because she was afraid that her maids would expose her identity. I'd like to see which Miss Sister is so powerful." Seeing Yan Xiao's fierce look, the drunkards all burst out laughing. After laughing, another drunkard suddenly reached out and lifted the hood of Xiao Yanru's cloak. Xiao Yanru was so scared that she couldn't help screaming and hurriedly covered the opened cloak with her hand. "I'm from the Ministry of Justice. Get out of the way. Do you want to ruin the affairs of the Ministry of Justice?" Qiu Yu's cold face appeared at the top of the stairs, and his cold eyes fell on the drunkards. The affairs of the Ministry of Justice were enough to startle the drunkards, and they involuntarily stepped aside. Yan Xiao grabbed Xiao Yanru's hand and ran out in a hurry. When they got to the door and got in the carriage again, Xiao Yanru was relieved. She gritted her teeth and secretly hated herself. If it weren't for the fact that she was going out with her identity hidden, she would not have spared these presumptuous drunkards. Fortunately, Qiu Yu showed up to help her out in the end. Otherwise, she might not have left so easily. "Miss, shall we find out who these drunkards are and send someone to teach them a lesson?" Yan Xiao said angrily. "No." Xiao Yanru shook her head with a gloomy face. At this time, she couldn't cause any trouble. She had to go back and report it to her mother first. Xiao Wanru didn't die in the disaster, but she was in a coma, and a scared servant girl insisted that it was her. It was a little difficult to deal with this matter, so she had to seize the initiative. Xiao Yanru hurried home to discuss it with Madame of Duke Xing, and the courtyard of young Madame of Duke Yong's mansion was also not peaceful. At that time, Qin Yuru deliberately sent someone to guard the tea house, waiting to see the scene, and then reported it to Qin Yuru. Unexpectedly, she heard the old maid's betrayal. She immediately came back in a hurry to report it to Qin Yuru. Qin Yuru didn't live a good life in Duke Yong's mansion in the past 2 years, but it also made her smart in some aspects. When she heard from the servant that the old maid kept defending the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion but blamed the Qin's mansion, she knew that the old maid should be the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion's servant. She was so angry that she smashed several cups on the table. The servant she arranged to serve old Madame Qin actually sided with Xiao Yanru. How could she not be angry? Chapter 606. Qi Rongji's visit, what Qi Rongji said to her, and after she came back, she did it according to Qi Rongji's method. Then Xiao Wanru had an accident, but after the accident, she actually blamed Qin's mansion. If Qin's mansion was blamed, it might make people think of her. How could Qin Yuru be willing to do that? After slightly tidying up her clothes, Qin Yuru stood up with a gloomy face and said, "Let's go to see Grandma." Her former grandma was now her grandma, the only person in Duke Yong's mansion who was good to her and the only person who could help her now. Xiao Yanru dared to plot against her and make her and Xiao Wanru suffer together. She would not let her get what she wanted. In a courtyard of Rui and Great Elder Princess, only the main room was lit. Xiao Wanru leaned on the couch, and Dr. Qi was feeling her pulse. Great Elder Princess sat by the couch and frowned uneasily. She always sat straight and had a good bearing, but now she was slightly tilted, showing a sense of restlessness and nervousness. Chu Luchen was sitting in the chair on the other side. After picking up the teacup at hand and taking a sip, he glanced at Great Elder Princess and comforted her in a gentle voice, "Great Aunt, don't worry. Zhuozhuo is fine." Great Elder Princess nodded in response to Chu Luchen, but she still stared at Dr. Qi, for fear that there was a slight mistake on his face. Finally, Qi Ju put down his hand. "Dr. Qi, how is Zhuozhuo?" Rui and Great Elder Princess asked nervously. "Don't worry, Great Elder Princess. She is just a little frightened. She is fine," Qi Ju said with a smile. "What should I pay attention to?" Rui and Great Elder Princess breathed a sigh of relief, but still asked worriedly. "Great Elder Princess, don't worry too much. Just take care and have a good rest." Qi Ju glanced at Chu Luchen, who was sitting aside and drinking tea leisurely. In fact, he wanted to tell Great Elder Princess that the fifth miss lying on the couch was really fine. In fact, what could happen to her? The secret guard took them to the tree on the cliff and hung them. Not long after, someone came up to save them. Although it was indeed a little dangerous to hang them on the tree, it was really not a big deal. In his opinion, the fifth miss was very bold and was definitely not comparable to ordinary misses. The idea of hanging on the tree was also the fifth miss's own idea. "Are you sure?" The Great Elder Princess was still worried. "It's really nothing serious," Qi Ju promised again. Hearing Qi Ju's repeated assurance, Great Elder Princess finally felt relieved. She took Qi Ju's hand and said angrily, "Zhuozhuo, do you know who wants to hurt you?" Great Elder Princess had only cared about Xiao Wanru's health just now, so she had time to ask about what had happened before. "Great Aunt, you can go and check the traces over there now. If I'm not wrong, they should have used fodder that drove the horses crazy," Chu Luchen said. "What grass?" Ruyan Great Elder Princess asked in surprise. She had never heard of this kind of grass and didn't know there was such a thing. Changxing grass, this kind of grass can drive horses crazy. When the carriage stops, there should be this kind of grass by the roadside, and it should be on the road leading to the cliff. This kind of grass is not from the Central Plains, it's from the nomadic regions of the border. But even there, this kind of grass is very rare. Chi-ju explained. This kind of grass drove horses crazy and made them lose their footing and fall off the cliff. No one could find out what had happened. Moreover, the horse had also fallen into the water and died at this time, so it would be more difficult to find out the truth. The purpose of setting up such a plot at this pass and letting the people in the tea house below see it clearly was to let these people be witnesses. They could clearly see the appearance of the carriage overturning, so that they could prove that the carriage had slipped out accidentally. It had just rained, the mountain road was slippery, and it was getting dark. Besides, it was the last part of the way down the mountain, and the coachman was most relaxed. These conditions were enough to make people think that it was just an accident. What they needed to do now was to turn this accident, which had been cleaned up by someone, into an accident again. Changxing Grass was the only one who could calculate so accurately that the carriage had an accident in that section of the road. But it was certain that even if the Changxing Grass had been used before, it would have been taken away by now. Coincidentally, Chu Luchen also had a few Changxing grasses. I'll send someone to check it now. Rui, and great elder princess said angrily. She stood up and was about to go out. Great aunt, please wait. It may have been cleaned up by now. Even if you go there, you can't find anything. Chu Luchen waved his hand. Xiao Xuanzi stood out from behind him and handed a small box to great elder princess. Chu Luchen narrowed his eyes and said lazily, Great aunt, here are a few Changxing grasses. You can ask someone to bring them over and bury them in the mud, then step on them a few times to make a mark of crushing them. Then you can go over and find some traces in front of everyone, but you still need to leave one or two for the Ministry of Justice to check. Ordinary people didn't know this kind of Changxing grass, but the people of the Ministry of Justice were different. There were some talents in the Ministry of Justice who knew strange methods, so it was the most suitable for them to find it. Rui, and great elder princess had already understood what Chu Luchen meant. She nodded and immediately asked someone to take the box and left in a hurry. Dr. Qi, if there's nothing else, you can go back early. Chu Luchen waved his hand and said to Qi Ju, who was still slowly wiping his hands. Qi Ju rolled his eyes helplessly. He knew that Chu Luchen would break the bridge after crossing the river. Great elder princess obviously invited him, but he insisted on following her. At this time, it was even better. Chu Luchen kicked him away as a guide. Alas, he really met the wrong person. Looking at the delicate fifth Miss Xiao, who was leaning against the couch, Qi Ju felt really worried for her. It was really pitiful for the girl who was favored by this evildoer. He complained in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. Although he was unwilling, he still asked slowly, Your Highness, do you want me to wait for you outside and go back together? No, you go back first. Chu Luchen waved his hand impolitely and glanced at Qi Ju coldly. Qi Ju was so scared that he unconsciously moved faster. He quickly packed up the medicine box and retreated to the door with a cheerful look. Was Chu Luchen serious about this? Chu Luchen waved his hand. Xiao Xuanzi winked at Yujie, who was standing in front of the bed. Then he waved his hand and turned to go out. Yujie hesitated for a moment and looked at Xiao Wanru. Seeing Xiao Wanru nod to her, she retreated to the door. Do you want some water? Chu Luchen looked at Xiao Wanru, picked up the kettle on the table, and poured a cup for her. Xiao Wanru sat up and nodded. Chu Luchen came over with the cup in his hand and handed it to her. Xiao Wanru reached out to take it and drank half a cup before putting it down. In fact, hanging on the tree was not without danger. If she fell, she would fall into the water. Even if her life would not be in danger, her reputation would be ruined. There was no woman over there who could pull her out of the water, and there were many onlookers. If her clothes got wet, her reputation would be ruined. Therefore, at that time, she held the branch by her hand tightly, for fear that she would accidentally fall when the wind blew. Chu Luchen took the cup in her hand, held her hand with his backhand, and pressed hard. Xiao Wanru cried out in pain, and her face immediately turned pale. Although she had applied medicine on her wound just now, she still felt a sharp pain when he pressed it so hard. Moreover, her foot had not recovered before. At this time, she was still injured. When she was rescued, she didn't know where she had bumped into. In fact, her leg and foot were also injured. However, for fear that great elder princess would be worried, she only said that her hand was injured, but didn't say anything else. Afraid of pain? Chu Liuchen's handsome smile looked very hateful. He slowly flattened Xiao Wanru's palm and looked at it. The blood immediately overflowed because of the pinch just now, which made Xiao Wanru frown in pain. Xiao Wanru nodded. She looked pitiful. On the surface, there seemed to be nothing wrong with her, but in fact, she was really injured in many places. Take off your dress and let me have a look. Chu Liuchen looked down at her dress, which was messy and torn. I don't need it. It's nothing. Xiao Wanru blushed and wanted to pull her hand back, but her hand was held tightly by Chu Liuchen, so she couldn't pull it back at all. Do you want me to help you take it off, or do you want to do it yourself? Chu Liuchen raised his eyebrows and said lazily. Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment and thought for a while. Knowing that he was not a rule-abiding person, she turned up the corner of her dress with a blush, and then turned up the legs of her trousers inside. Underneath the trousers, he could see several scratches on his fair skin. They were all stained with dried blood, and some of them seemed to be quite deep. Chu Liuchen's eyes darkened. He put the cup in his hand on the table, squatted in front of the bed, and reached out to tear her trousers. Immediately, he saw more scratches. For a moment, his handsome face tightened, and his thin lips were tightly pursed, showing the anger on his face. Xiao Wanru, your plan is really good. You are really cruel to yourself. Chu Liuchen sneered, reached out to take a wet towel from the basin beside him, and began to wipe for her. He wiped hard, and the scars immediately overflowed again. Xiao Wanru couldn't help groaning. She looked at Chu Liuchen with tears in her eyes and begged, Your Highness, please be gentle. Why didn't you ask those trees to be gentle before? Chu Liuchen tried to wipe for her, but he still did it hard. Then he looked up at Xiao Wanru with huge black waves rolling in his eyes, as if something was going to be slapped to the shore. The monstrous momentum made people unable to speak for a while. Xiao Wanru was so painful that she was about to cry. She could only look at Chu Liuchen pitifully. Of course, it was not the time to show off at this moment. I didn't know that I would get so many scratches. You didn't know? Chu Liuchen asked. He lowered his head again and exerted more strength in his hands. Another part of her body was bleeding. If you don't know, how can you put yourself in danger? I can't tell that the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion is so ruthless. It is the first time that I have seen a miss who can be so ruthless to herself. Chapter 607. Xiao Wanru felt that he was not helping her, but hurting her again. She was hung on the tree outside the cliff before. Even if she was hurt, she didn't pay attention to it because she was nervous and didn't feel that it was so painful. Now he wiped it again, but she was sweating in pain and looked pale. She subconsciously reached out to hold Chu Liuchen's hand. Your Highness, it hurts. She looked at him pitifully with a pair of beautiful eyes and showed her weakness. Now you know the pain. What were you doing before? I asked someone to protect you, not to hang you on the tree. Since you can't do it well, let's change someone else. Chu Liuchen said coldly, but his hand was a little gentler, and he didn't wipe it forcefully. Xiao Wanru grabbed Chu Liuchen's hand. This time, she didn't stop him from wiping it. She just asked anxiously, what happened to the secret guard? What's the use of a useless person? Chu Liuchen said coldly. No, he didn't want to do this. I asked him to help me. Your Highness, there won't be such a thing next time. In fact, I can't stay in the Yuhui nunnery anymore, so I happened to go down the mountain with the excuse of them. Hearing the bad news, Xiao Wanru didn't dare to hide it anymore and said hurriedly. Qing was the bright guard who protected her, and there were two secret guards who protected Xiao Wanru in secret. Usually, They were the ones who sent messages down the mountain and Qing contacted them. Since Qing and the two secret guards were here, Xiao Wanru felt that things were much easier to handle. It was the same this time. It was the secret guards who sent the message to Chu Luchen and asked him to make arrangements for the people of the capital governor to appear at the Yuhui nunnery. And then you put yourself in danger. Xiao Wanru, you are really capable. You dare to do this for this. Chu Luchen suddenly threw the handkerchief in his hand on Xiao Wanru's white and tender calf. He stood up with a gloomy face, sat in front of the couch, reached out to pull Xiao Wanru into his arms, and looked down at Xiao Wanru in his arms. Before Xiao Wanru could react, the corner of her mouth was kissed, and then her head was held tightly, making her have to bear Chu Liuchen's hot breath. After a long while, Chu Luchen let go of her, and his eyes softened a little. He reached out and pressed the corner of Xiao Wanru's lips, which had become softer and softer after being kissed, with his eyes still deep and unfathomable. Xiao Wanru gasped for breath and subconsciously reached out to push Chu Luchen. She had never seen Chu Luchen so furious. They had been respectful to each other and occasionally had some ambiguous behaviors, but they had never been as passionate as today, which made her feel ashamed and annoyed at the moment. Her heart was beating wildly and she didn't even know what to do next. Sensing that Chu Liuchen's body temperature was also very high, Xiao Wanru pushed Chu Luchen more and more at a loss. Her eyes were filled with tears, which made people feel sorry for her and feel pity for her. Her delicate little face, which was as delicate as water, looked flustered and charming, like 100 flowers in full bloom. As she grew older, Xiao Wanru's appearance became more and more outstanding, but she had always been indifferent in front of others, which covered her own charm. Because of the kiss just now, her coldness had disappeared. She was as beautiful as a dream, charming and able to topple cities. Chu Luchen reached out and hugged her tightly again, and then slowly let go of her. This girl was getting more and more beautiful. She couldn't go out after returning to the capital city. Coincidentally, she was also injured now, so she could stay in the yard and rest more. Thinking of this, the anxiety in his heart slowly faded away. After letting go of Xiao Wanru, he squatted down again to wipe Xiao Wanru's feet. This time, he was much gentler, and Xiao Wanru almost didn't feel any pain. After wiping the stains on her feet, he took out a bottle of ointment from his bosom and smeared some light green ointment on her feet. Immediately, a cool feeling spread from her legs. Xiao Wanru couldn't help blushing, sighed comfortably, and relaxed. It was very quiet in the room, and only the breathing of the two of them could be heard. If you want to go down the mountain, just tell me next time. Chu Luchen stood up, reached out to take one of Xiao Wanru's hands, pulled her cuff, and tore it. Immediately, her white and tender arm was exposed, and there were also some scratches on it. This kind of thing is not a big deal. If you intervene, it may become a real big deal, and it will not be easy to solve. Xiao Wanru said euphemistically. Of course, she knew Chu Liuchen's ability, but this was a matter of the inner court, and she could also do it, so she didn't want to bother Chu Luchen. Moreover, there were people sent by Chu Luchen. In fact, Chu Luchen secretly helped her. Without Qing and those secret guards, she couldn't have taken over the matter so smoothly. This time, Chu Luchen snorted coldly and ignored her. He still wiped the traces on her feet with a towel, and then applied the ointment. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and obediently let him apply the ointment. Although his face was still sullen, it was a little less hostile than before. She said, "The two secret guards are very good. Don't replace them. They are very good to me. I'm used to them, so you don't need to replace them for a while. Is it useful to hurt you like this?" Chu Luchen raised his eyebrows and said, "It's not their fault. I asked for it. I won't do it again." Xiao Wanru pleaded softly. Looking at the wound on her arm, she blinked her watery eyes and looked very aggrieved. "Let them receive 20 strokes of the cane later," Chu Luchen said lazily. If you continue to talk nonsense, it will not be as simple as 20 strokes of the cane. Chu Liuchen's voice became gloomy and he stared at Xiao Wanru unkindly. Xiao Wanru thought for a while and felt that it was better for her to be practical. She pursed her lips and stopped talking about the secret guards. The two secret guards were good at martial arts, so it should not be a big problem for them to receive 20 strokes of the cane. After the wounds on the two arms were treated, Chu Liuchen's eyes turned to Xiao Wanru's coat. Seeing his eyes turning to her, Xiao Wanru hurriedly bent down and hugged herself, for fear that he would tear her clothes ruthlessly. She said, "I'm not injured, but my arms and feet are injured. I was scratched when I was hugging and clasping the branches." Chu Liuchen did not insist this time. Looking at Xiao Wanru's intact coat, he murmured noncommittally and then washed his hands in the basin. After that, he sat down on the side of the bed, reached out to pull Xiao Wanru into his arms and tidied her thin hair. "Next, you can faint in this yard." Chu Liuchen leaned back on the cushion that Xiao Wanru had leaned on before and said with a cold face. Xiao Wanru stole a glance at him. His handsome face, which was like that of a banished immortal, made him look like an otherworldly person. There should not be such a flawless person in the world. He closed his eyes slightly, and his long and curly eyelashes covered his eyelids, making him look even more beautiful. Even women would feel ashamed of their inferiority to such a look. If it were not for such a light lip color, pale skin, and a little sickly look, he would be more dazzling, and no man in the city could compare with him. But even so, Xiao Wanru still felt that Chu Liuchen's beauty was beyond that of a man and a woman. His pale lips made him look a little sickly, but such a sickly look made him as gentle as an unparalleled child in ancient times. Lying here with his eyes closed now, he looked lonely and unapproachable. Anyone who saw him would feel sorry for him. Was this also an important reason why the Empress Dowager and the Emperor doted on him so much? There were thousands of handsome men in the world, but only he was unparalleled. She didn't know when her heart sped up, and she felt as if it was about to jump out of her chest. Her watery eyes blinked twice, and then she lowered her head and looked at his light lip color. Compared with her thick lip color, his lip color had always been so light, but he had a kind of elegance that was different from ordinary people. He looked very thin, but in fact, he was very strong. Being held in his arms, Xiao Wanru could feel the thickness of his chest, which was very comfortable and calming. The faint fragrance of medicine made Xiao Wanru feel very intimate. She learned medicine from Mingqiu Nun, so she had a sense of intimacy with the smell of medicine. The smell of medicine on Chu Liuchen made her feel kind and pleasant, and her body involuntarily relaxed. Before the accident, she had been nervous. Although she knew that something would happen when she went down the mountain, she didn't know what would happen. Sitting in the carriage behind, she had been staring at the carriage in front. After that, the carriage in front rolled down the mountain, and Qing-er jumped out of the carriage. Then, with the help of the secret guards, she and Yujie climbed up the tree by the cliff. Although they didn't hang there for a long time, they were always on tenterhooks, for fear that they would really fall down. After that, she was injured. For fear that Rui, a great elder princess, would worry about her, she didn't tell her. As a result, the wounds all over her body had been hurting, which made her nervous. At this time, after applying medicine, she felt cool and comfortable all over, and the familiar fragrance of medicine made her feel relaxed. She closed her watery eyes and fell asleep after a while. Sensing that Xiao Wanru's breathing had stabilized, Chu Liuchen looked down at Xiao Wanru. She slept like a child, less nimble than in the past, but more childish. He reached out to touch her forehead, and then slowly touched her tender face. At last, he touched the corner of her lips, but he couldn't help frowning, with some inexplicable meaning. He just stared at Xiao Wanru in a daze. After a long while, Chu Liuchen put her down, pulled the quilt over, covered her body, and then left. "Master." Seeing him come out, Xiao Xuanzi hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. Yujie followed him, looked inside worriedly, and then bowed to him. "Your miss is asleep. Go in and change her clothes before going to bed," Chu Liuchen said lightly. Yujie couldn't wait to go in and have a look. She nodded, entered the room, closed the door behind her, and turned around the screen. When she saw that Xiao Wanru's clothes were torn like pieces of cloth, she was so shocked that she almost screamed. Fortunately, she was bold. She hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth and stepped forward to check Xiao Wanru carefully. You can find out what happened last time. In the corridor, Chu Liuchen's gloomy and cold voice sounded, at the gate of the palace. Yes. Xiao Xuanzi immediately understood, and the corner of his mouth twitched. His master was angry. Some people just don't have eyes. Chapter 608. Yujie was relieved when she found that only the clothes on her legs and arms were torn and ointment had been applied. It should be Prince Chen who applied the ointment to her miss personally, but he still cared about the rules between men and women, so he didn't help her change her clothes personally. Yujie admired and felt happy for her Mississippi. Of course, she knew that her miss had been promised to Prince Chen by the Empress Dowager. Although he went too far at this time, it was also because Prince Chen was worried about her miss. After thinking it through, Yujie breathed a sigh of relief, took out a dress from the wardrobe, and carefully helped Xiao Wanru change it. This courtyard was prepared by Great Elder Princess for her miss for almost 3 years, and it was filled with her miss's clothes, which were all prepared by Great Elder Princess for her Mississippi. There were not only a lot of them but also very beautiful. Yujie knew Xiao Wanru's preference, so she picked a light and comfortable dress and helped Xiao Wanru change the clothes that were torn before. Even though she helped Xiao Wanru change her clothes, Xiao Wanru didn't wake up. It could be seen that she was really tired before, so Yujie became more and more careful. She also had injuries on her body, but she had grown up in Jingxin nunnery and usually followed Mingqiu nun to collect herbs. She had suffered many such scratches. Although she had hung on the branch with Xiao Wanru before, there were not many scratches on her body, and they were not as deep as Xiao Wanru's. Thinking that her miss had been pampered in the boudoir in the past and had never been hurt like this, Yujie's palms ached. Both the first Miss Qin and the first Miss Xiao were vicious people. This time, it was time to see how they would bite each other. This night was destined to be an unusual night, especially the place where the accident happened at the foot of the Yuhui nunnery, which had now been taken over by the people of the Ministry of Justice. Because it was late now, even if the Ministry of Justice wanted to investigate it, it couldn't be found in a short time. Only a few people of the Ministry of Justice stayed here, but they didn't immediately check the traces. Many people who saw the accident said that the road was slippery and it was the way down the mountain. Such an accident happened because the coachman was negligent. Although it was an accident, others couldn't be blamed. As for what the servant girl said, it couldn't be true since she was so crazy. Very few people thought it was true. It was at this time that Rui and Great Elder Princess came over. When Great Elder Princess's people came to pick up Xiao Wanru, Great Elder Princess didn't come. But now she came over with a large group of people aggressively. The people who were still chatting in the tea house immediately stopped talking. When the officers of the Ministry of Justice saw that it was Great Elder Princess's carriage, they hurriedly found someone to come over. Great Elder Princess looked up and saw that it was Qiu Yu. May I know why the Great Elder Princess has come at this time? Qiu Yu asked cautiously after bowing. After meeting Xiao Wanru in private, he asked the department for this assignment to keep watch at night, so that he could know the progress of this case as soon as possible. Lord Qiu, I want to find the mountain road. Why did my granddaughter's carriage have such an accident? I heard that there were people who went down the mountain before, but nothing happened. Sitting high in the carriage, Great Elder Princess looked at Qiu Yu coldly and said. Qiu Yu was the youngest legitimate son of Earl Liang, so she had naturally met him. Great Elder Princess, it's so late now. You'd better not look at it. If something happens, I can't bear it. Qiu Yu said with a wry smile. You don't have to bear it. I'll bear it myself. I just want to see who Zhuozhuo offended. How dare she set up such an evil plot secretly? Rui and Great Elder Princess said coldly. She got off the carriage with the help of the old maid beside her and looked at Qiu Yu coldly with her hands clasped behind her back. Qiu Yu's forehead began to sweat, but he had no time to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead at this time. He said, "Great Elder Princess, this may be an accident. No one wants this to happen. Now it's hard to explain it. It's wrong for the fifth miss to go down the mountain in a hurry at this time." "How could she? Do you mean that Zhuozhuo brought about her own death and it has nothing to do with others?" Great Elder Princess sneered and looked at Qiu Yu coldly with an amazing momentum. "Great Elder Princess, that's not what I mean. The Ministry of Justice can only give you an answer after tomorrow's investigation." Although Qiu Yu was afraid, he couldn't keep silent at the moment, so he had to bite the bullet and say it. "It's too late to find out the truth tomorrow. I want to find out now. I'd like to see whether the first miss of Qin's mansion or the first miss of Shao's mansion wants to hurt Zhuozhuo, or they conspired together." Rui and Great Elder Princess said coldly. Then she turned around and walked to the mountain road with her back straight. A large group of maids and old maids followed her. Looking at this situation, Qiu Yu knew that he couldn't stop her even if he wanted to, so he could only wave his hand to signal several people of the Ministry of Justice to follow up and accompany Rui and Great Elder Princess to go up the mountain. He couldn't let Rui and Great Elder Princess talk nonsense. In fact, he had asked someone to check it before, but they didn't find anything. Naturally, he didn't think there would be anything wrong at this time. Therefore, he was not nervous. No matter how powerful Great Elder Princess was, Duke Xing's mansion was not weak and couldn't let Great Elder Princess talk nonsense. As for Qin's mansion, of course, it was not in Qiu Yu's consideration. Seeing that they had gone up, some onlookers also followed them to watch the fun. The people brought by Great Elder Princess placed many lights around, illuminating the scene as if it were daytime. Some old maids went forward to check it and found that the wheel marks were very obvious. The wheel marks went straight down without any delay or other traces. Several careful old maids of Great Elder Princess's mansion began to check it. An hour later, several old maids shook their heads and came to report to Great Elder Princess. There was really nothing suspicious. The wheel marks suddenly rushed down and deepened. It could be seen that the speed soared here, which was the main reason why the wheel slid down the cliff. It had nothing to do with others. Qiu Yu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Rui and Great Elder Princess would make trouble rudely. There was no senior official of the Ministry of Justice here, so he was afraid that this arrogant Great Elder Princess could not be suppressed. But now Rui and Great Elder Princess couldn't find anything suspicious, so she couldn't make trouble even if she wanted to. But before Qiu Yu was completely relieved, he saw an old maid hurriedly run to Great Elder Princess with a grass-like thing in her hand. "Great Elder Princess, why are these grasses uprooted? Even if the wheels were pressed down, they couldn't be uprooted." Rui and Great Elder Princess took the grass from the old maid with a cold face and looked at it with a frown. The people around also looked at Great Elder Princess's hand in the light. It was a very ordinary blade of grass, just like any other ordinary grass. It didn't look very outstanding. There was mud on the blade of grass, and there were even marks on the mud. It was obvious that the carriage's wheels had run over this blade of grass. The roots of the grass were not short, and a few of the leaves were crushed, but the roots were intact. That's right. The wheels are moving at an extremely fast speed. It's possible for them to crush the grass. How could they uproot them? This doesn't make sense. Someone at the side took a closer look and couldn't help but say. Grass can be cut or crushed, but it's impossible to uproot it. Another person said with certainty. These people were all travelers and had experienced many things. After hearing what they said, many of them nodded in agreement. They all felt that this stalk of grass was suspicious. "Princess Royal, I also found a grass like this, but I didn't crush it and uproot it." Another old maid picked up a grass and said. Following that, he picked up a few more. All of the grasses were the same, with marks on them. He could confirm that they had indeed been run over by the wheels, but they were not broken, only broken. A few blades of grass grow, but the roots come out of the soil. I pulled it out. This phenomenon was very abnormal. Qiu Yucai, who had just relaxed, became nervous again. If this matter was not handled normally, Duke Xing's mansion might be involved. He had promised the first Miss Xiao before that she would not be involved in this matter. Now it was difficult for him to explain it to her. Taking 2 steps forward, Qiu Yu squeezed to the side of Great Elder Princess and said with a flattering smile, "Great Elder Princess, it's just a few blades of grass. It's not a big deal. Perhaps this kind of grass is like this. It's soft and moist, but it's very easy to uproot it. When the wheels of the carriage run over it, the originally weak roots will be uprooted." Rui and Great Elder Princess glanced at Qiu Yu coldly and said, "Since this matter has been sent to the Ministry of Justice, it naturally means that it is not a small matter. My granddaughter almost lost her life. Even if this matter is brought to the Emperor, I believe that the Emperor will give me an explanation instead of giving me a very useless reason like what Lord Qiu did. Great Elder Princess, this matter has not been decided yet." Qiu Yu explained in detail with a flushed face. "Well, I have to go back to take care of my granddaughter. She has not woken up yet. As for these blades of grass, I will hand them over to the Ministry of Justice tomorrow." Rui and Great Elder Princess asked someone to put away the few blades of grass she found and turned to walk to the tea house with a large group of people. The carriage was waiting outside the tea house. After passing through the tea house, Great Elder Princess and her group got on the carriage. The carriage turned a corner and left, leaving an idle and bored person and the people of the Ministry of Justice waiting here. "Your Excellency, what should we do?" A person of the Ministry of Justice came over and asked Qiu Yu, who was in a daze. "Ask someone to monitor the scene and stop anyone from entering or leaving at will." Qiu Yu composed himself and gritted his teeth. Before the matter was clear, the scene could not be turned over at will. But the person just now was Rui and Great Elder Princess, and she turned over the scene under his nose, so it was not his dereliction of duty, it was a quiet night. Early the next morning, the whole capital city was in an uproar. The reason why there was such an uproar was that the 5th Miss Xiao was said to be a bane before. No one expected that the 5th Miss Xiao would get into trouble again after such a short time. Thinking of the bane matter that had caused such a big stir before and even caused the emperor to take action, the 5th Miss Xiao almost lost her life this time when she went down the mountain. Could it be that someone really framed the 5th Miss Xiao? Rui and Great Elder Princess's people arrived at the Ministry of Justice early in the morning and even knocked the big drum at the gate of the Ministry of Justice, bringing a message from Rui and Great Elder Princess and a few blades of grass found under the wheel mark. The chief officer of the Ministry of Justice was disturbed by this matter as soon as he went to the yamen. However, the other party was Great Elder Princess, so they could not do anything about it. They could only check the scene again in a hurry and pick up 2 blades of grass at the mouth of the cliff. Since then, these strange blades of grass had attracted everyone's attention, but no one knew what was wrong with them. The matter was in a deadlock. But the next day, someone suddenly came to the Ministry of Justice. Chapter 609. Why are you so depressed? Are you frightened by the punishment your mother gave to the servants the night before yesterday? Old Madam reached out to touch Xiao Yenru's head and said lovingly. These days, Old Madam felt much better, and the doctor also said that she just needed to take good care of her body. She was dressed in a dark striped brown robe with a string of Buddha beads hanging on her chest. She looked very kind when she smiled. Anyone would think that Old Madam was the most kind and Buddha-like person in front of them. Old Madam reached out to pull Xiao Yenru to her side with a distressed look. Your mother is really too much. It's fine if she's punished. For a thief like her, it's her good fortune if they only punish her. But how could your mother ask the other servants to watch the punishment? Look, she scared you. Old Madam looked at Xiao Yenru, whose face was slightly pale, with distress. She even blamed her daughter-in-law. No one could blame her for being partial to Xiao Yenru. In this mansion, only Xiao Yenru was favored by her. Although she couldn't compare with her eldest grandson, Xiao Yenru was undoubtedly the most favored one in terms of the degree of affection. Xiao Hua, then, her eldest grandson, was also slightly inferior in this aspect. Grandma, I am worried about 5th sister. Xiao Yenru lowered her head and shook old madam's hand a few times. Grandma, I want to see fifth sister. I don't know if she has woken up. After all, she is a miss of our mansion. It is not appropriate for her to live in great elder princess's mansion. Hearing her mention Xiao Wanru, the smile on old madam's face faded and she became angry. She had known what happened to Xiao Wanru at the foot of the Yuhui nunnery yesterday, so she didn't take it seriously. Since she doesn't treat our mansion as her home, why do you worry about her so much? You are too kind and soft-hearted. You wanted to accompany her when she was cultivating on the mountain, but look how she treated you. Old madam reached out her finger and pointed hard on Xiao Yenru's forehead, with a look of exasperation. Grandma, but she is fifth sister. Xiao Yenru's eyes turned red, and she felt aggrieved. Old madam sighed helplessly and put down her hand. She inexplicably went down the mountain at that time, and I don't know why. Later, she had an accident there. After she was rescued, she didn't return to her own mansion, but went to Great Elder Princess's mansion. Our mansion only knows about her from others. Since she is so disloyal to our mansion, we don't have to be too accommodating to her. Nanny Yu, who was standing behind old madam, raised her head slightly and looked at old madam. She wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. However, when she saw Xiao Yenru's gaze, she involuntarily lowered her head and pulled the corners of her sleeves tightly, for fear that she would lose control and say something wrong. What happened to the fifth miss the night before had now been spread widely. It was said that the fifth miss was deceived to go down the mountain and hurriedly went down the mountain because she was worried about old Madame Qin's health. After that, she fainted and was picked up by Rui, and Great Elder Princess's servant. She didn't come to their mansion because no one in their mansion cared about this matter at all. It was said that this matter was also reported to the gate of Duke Xing's mansion that night, but the guards at the gate didn't take it seriously. However, as a servant, it was not appropriate for her to say these words. Although she had followed old Madam for so long, she really felt that old Madam was wrong at this time. In fact, she was wrong from the beginning. Grandma, don't be angry. No matter what fifth sister has done wrong or doesn't treat us as her real family, it doesn't matter. People's hearts are warm, and we just need to comfort them. Grandma, I still worry about fifth sister and want to see her, okay? Xiao Yenru shook old Madam's hand coquettishly. Looking at Xiao Yenru, who was full of longing in front of her, old Madam was angry and resentful. Nothing had happened before, but Xiao Wanru had caused so many troubles in their mansion. She was really a troublemaker. As long as she thought of this, she really couldn't like her. She touched the Buddha beads on her neck with her fingers and tried to calm herself down. This troublemaker was really annoying. She didn't know what she owed her in her previous life that made her mess in their mansion like this. Go and bring some tonics to see if she is really in a coma or not. If she is awake, ask her to come back early. The daughter of Duke Xing's mansion doesn't need to stay in her maternal grandfather's house. If others see her, they will think that there is no courtyard in our mansion. Old Madam snorted and said. Looking at old Madam, Nanny Yu wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Although the courtyard was indeed given to the fifth miss to live in because of Rui and Great Elder Princess's power, Madam had only moved the things that had been placed in the courtyard outside these days and had not moved other things inside. So, it was really not suitable for fifth miss to live in for a while. However, this was arranged by Madam of Duke Xing. Nanny Yu felt that it was better for her to keep her mouth shut, so she lowered her head again. Okay, Grandma, I'll go to see fifth sister and tell you how she is when I come back. Grandma, don't worry. Xiao Yenru said gently with a smile. Seeing that, old Madam's heart softened. She nodded repeatedly and said, okay, go and come back soon. Be careful. Don't provoke this girl again. If she says something unpleasant, just ignore it and come back by yourself. This granddaughter was the one she valued most. On the one hand, she was good at talking and was doting on. On the other hand, old Madam had high hopes for her. In the future, she might rely on this granddaughter to improve the strength of the whole Duke Xing's mansion and ensure that Duke Xing's mansion could prosper for more than 100 years. Based on this, old madam naturally doted on Xiao Yanru for fear that she would let it go. "Grandma, I got it," Xiao Yanru said softly. She stood up and bowed deeply to old madam. Then she turned around and left with her servant girl. This child is so kind. The other side doesn't take her seriously, but she is still so warm-hearted. Old madam looked at Xiao Yanru's back and sighed. Nanny Yu knew that old madam was talking to her, so she smiled and flattered, "Old madam, don't blame the first Mississippi. The first miss has been raised so well and is so kind. It's all because of old madam's good teaching. Now everyone in the capital city praises the first miss when mentioning her. This is the bearing of a mistress." Xiao Yanru would naturally marry into the royal family in the future. In addition to the masters of Duke Xing's mansion, several confidants also knew it. The mistress of the royal family was the master of the prince's mansion, and the mother of the country. Old madam narrowed her eyes and smiled. She nodded repeatedly and said, "That's right. This child. Forget it. This child has such a good bearing because she grows up. Look at the little one. She is so mean. She is indeed raised by a small family. She doesn't have the character of a lady from a noble family at all." The first half of old madam's sentence was about Xiao Yanru, so she looked gentle. But the second half was about Xiao Wanru, so her face immediately became cold and full of disgust. Since she recognized Xiao Wanru, old madam had been regretting it. Why did she let Xiao Wanru come in like this? At that time, she should have forcefully intervened in it. She couldn't let Xiao Wanru return to her family. Now she spoiled her so much that she didn't even know who her father's family was. She went to Great Elder Princess's mansion every day and asked Great Elder Princess, the shrew, to find fault with her. Every time she thought of this, old madam was furious and felt that she had been too soft-hearted at that time. She had been so unruly before she returned to her family. After she was recognized, she wanted to teach her well. However, she had to go to the mountain to cultivate and observe filial piety. She could only teach her well after she came back from the Yuhui nunnery. If she couldn't be taught well, there was no need to arrange a marriage for her. It was not that Duke Xing's mansion couldn't afford to raise an old girl. Even if she really died of old age in the backyard of Duke Xing's mansion, she wouldn't make any trouble for Duke Xing's mansion at that time. The biggest difference between first miss and fifth miss is that one of them was taught by you. Nanny Yu said with a smile. When Wanru comes back, I have to teach her well. This way, we won't lose the face of our mansion. Old madam nodded and had an idea in her mind. There were still a few months, so she had to make some preparations. At that time, she could teach Xiao Wanru well, in case Xiao Wanru didn't know what her current surname was. The carriage of Duke Xing's mansion stopped in front of Rui and Great Elder Princess's door. A servant girl had already gotten off the carriage and went to the door to report. Xiao Yanru was waiting in the carriage. Although she looked calm, she was very uneasy. She didn't know Xiao Wanru's current situation, so she specially came to have a look. Now it was said that she or Qin Yuru hurt Xiao Wanru, and it was still in the Ministry of Justice. It was Qin Yuru who did it, but if it was involved, she could be involved in it. She really felt very uneasy. She had to see Xiao Wanru before she could make a decision. If it didn't work, she could ask Prince Yu and Prince Zhou to help her clear the suspicion. After all, it was Qin Yuru who really did it this time. She only needed to be careful not to have anything to do with Qin Yuru. A servant ran out and led the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion to the side door. When they got inside, another old maid came to lead them all the way to the parking place, and the carriage stopped. Shuqi helped Xiao Yanru get out of the carriage. Xiao Yanru looked around and found that this was a large parking lot, but there were only 2 cars, including hers. She thought that this should be a place for guests to park their carriages, but she didn't know who else came to visit Great Elder Princess today. Judging from the carriage's appearance, it was parked in the innermost part. If there was a sign, it was on the innermost side. For a moment, she really couldn't recognize which mansion it belonged to. But judging from the size and appearance of the carriage, it should not belong to a particularly powerful family. Xiao Yanru glanced at it and had come to an accurate conclusion. She ignored the carriage in front of her and followed the old maid leading the way all the way inside. She came here to find out the truth today, and the corresponding person was Xiao Wanru. Was she still unconscious now? She really couldn't believe it. Chapter 610. The old maid led her all the way around and finally stopped outside a flower hall. Xiao Yanru had lived in Rui, an great elder princess's mansion, for a period of time. Looking around, she knew that this was the place where Rui, an great elder princess, used to meet guests. This place was relatively close to Great Elder Princess's courtyard, but it was not inside. Great Elder Princess liked this kind of flower hall that was not in her courtyard. As expected, when she was led inside, she saw Great Elder Princess sitting high up in the flower hall with a dignified face. Xiao Yanru took 2 steps forward and bowed to Great Elder Princess respectfully. Great Elder Princess waved her hand and motioned her to sit aside. Xiao Yanru sat down elegantly and saw a cup of tea on the table opposite her. It was obvious that Great Elder Princess had met someone just now, and it should be the owner of the carriage she saw. She withdrew her eyes and said with a bit of gentle concern on her face, "Great Elder Princess, can you ask how my 5th sister is now?" Great Elder Princess put down the teacup in her hand, looked at Xiao Yanru coldly, and said with an indifferent look without hesitation, "Only your mansion asked you to come here? Where are your grandmother and mother?" "Grandmother is still ill now. After hearing about 5th sister, she wanted to come here at that time. However, because she was in poor health, I was afraid to scare her, so I told her that 5th sister had recovered and was fine. So I stopped grandmother. Mother is taking care of grandmother and can't leave for a while." Xiao Yanru said respectfully with her head slightly lowered. Her words were very appropriate. Great Elder Princess's eyes fell on her face. Seeing that she was very respectful, she said with a faint sneer on her face, "Zhuozhuo hasn't woken up yet. It doesn't matter whether you come or not. Go back." Great Elder Princess said bluntly. "Great Elder Princess, I really want to know how my 5th sister is. Please let me see her. Otherwise, I can't feel at ease." Xiao Yanru raised her head with tears in her eyes and looked at Great Elder Princess expectantly. Then she slowly stood up, walked to Great Elder Princess, knelt down, and said sadly, "Great Elder Princess, please grant my wish." Shuqi also knelt behind Xiao Yanru in silence. The parlor quieted down. Only the sound of the Great Elder Princess taking a sip of tea and putting down the lid slowly could be heard. But then there was silence, which made Xiao Yanru, who had been confident, feel uneasy. Could it be that Great Elder Princess had seen something? This kind of silence was actually very exhausting. "Is the courtyard arranged for Zhuozhuo ready?" After a long while, she heard Great Elder Princess's question, but she didn't let her get up. "It's been arranged. It's the courtyard that Great Elder Princess mentioned before. Now it's almost ready. If you can go back to the mansion now, you can live in it," Xiao Yanru said calmly. The courtyard had almost been decorated. However, Madame of Duke Xing was unwilling to accept the fact that it was Xiao Wanru's wedding room instead of Xiao Hua An's. She moved out all the good decorations that had been placed in it before. As for the new decorations, they had never been ready. Except for a set of furniture sent by Ruyan Great Elder Princess, there were not many other ornaments. "Get up. She hasn't woken up yet. You can just look at her from a distance." Ruyan Great Elder Princess seemed to be satisfied with her answer and said in a less harsh voice. Shuqi hurriedly stood up and helped Xiao Yanru up. "Thank you, Great Elder Princess," Xiao Yanru said politely. She bowed to Great Elder Princess again and then left with the old maid who led the way. This time, they didn't walk very far. Although there were many twists and turns, the buildings in the Great Elder Princess's residence were always like this. Even though they were close, they still had to go around for a long time. There were trees and pavilions. There was a scenery every 5 steps and a pavilion every 10 steps. First Miss Xiao. In a pavilion not far from them, Qin Yuru watched Xiao Yenru walk through a corridor in front of her with a gloomy face. It's the first Miss Xiao of Duke Xing's mansion. She should also come to see the 5th Miss today. In the whole Duke Xing's mansion, only the first Miss dotes on the 5th Miss the most. In fact, it is impossible that the first Miss wants to hurt the 5th Miss. The old maid who led the way glanced at Xiao Yenru's back and said. Qin Yuru's face became colder and colder. She pursed her lips tightly and the corners of her eyes trembled uncontrollably. Thinking of what her grandmother had told her, she took a deep breath and suppressed the irritation in her heart. Today, she came to show her sisterhood to Xiao Wanru, so she couldn't get angry and ruin it. It was said that it was either her or Xiao Yenru who led Xiao Wanru down the mountain. It was said that the frightened servant girl kept saying that it was Xiao Yenru, but some people said that Xiao Wanru went to see old Madame Qin and was led down the mountain by her. Her grandmother said that she should try to lead this matter to Xiao Yenru and told her not to underestimate Xiao Yenru. Xiao Yenru had such a good reputation in the capital city. If she didn't manage it, it couldn't fall from the sky. What made Qin Yuru most furious was that her grandmother said that what Qi Rongji said to her before and helped her plan might be done by the first Miss Xiao. Obviously, she wanted to use her to hurt Xiao Wanru, but she also said that she had a blind date with Xiao Wanru and her sister. Thinking that she had been used by Xiao Yenru, Qin Yuru's face turned livid, and blue veins stood out on her bony forehead. She clenched her fists hard to suppress the rage that rushed to her heart. She had come to visit yesterday, but the people in Great Elder Princess's mansion didn't let her in yesterday. They said that Great Elder Princess was worried about Xiao Wanru and had no time to see her. Therefore, Qin Yuru came early this morning. Unexpectedly, after sitting in the flower hall for a long time, she didn't see Great Elder Princess. Later, someone came to take her to see Xiao Wanru. But before she went to Xiao Wanru's place, she saw Xiao Yenru go to Xiao Wanru's place from another way. How long will it take? Qin Yuru suppressed the anger in her heart and said coldly. Soon. It will take some time to come from here. Young madam, please. The old maid of Rui and Great Elder Princess's mansion looked respectful, but she was a little cold in dealing with things. At first glance, it was obvious that she was not willing to lead the way. Let's go. Qin Yuru said with a cold face. Yes, young madam, please come with me. The old maid said and turned to lead them to another way. Xiao Yenru arrived at Xiao Wanru's courtyard first. She took a deep breath and stood in the corridor, waiting for the reply inside. After a while, she saw Yujie come out with red eyes. She bowed deeply to Xiao Yenru and said, First Miss. Where is your master? Xiao Yenru looked at the little maid who was boiling medicine in the corner of the corridor and asked. The whole courtyard was filled with a strong smell of medicine. There seemed to be people dressed as imperial physicians in the wing room. Seeing her outside, no one came out rudely. My master is still in a coma. Until now, she hasn't woken up. The imperial physician said that he needs to see her again. If she still doesn't wake up, something will happen. Yujie said with tears falling down her cheeks with red eyes. Xiao Yenru looked at Yujie's performance carefully with a trace of doubt in her eyes. She didn't think that Xiao Wanru would really be in a coma. I'll go and have a look. She lifted her foot and walked into the main room. First Miss, First Miss. Yujie seemed to want to stop her, but Shuchi pulled her by the arm and said, My master just wants to see the 5th Mississippi. If you need anything, just tell me. Don't let anything happen to the 5th Miss. As she said, she took Yujie's hand and followed Xiao Yenru into the main room. The outer room of the main room was very empty. There was no one in it, but the smell of medicine was extremely strong. After entering the inner room, Xiao Wanru was lying quietly on the wide bed with her face facing the sky and her hands folded in front of her chest. Her face was as pale as snow, and her bright lips were also pale. She looked like a jade beauty lying on the bed, but there was no vitality in her. If it weren't for the slight rise and fall of her chest, people might think that she had died. Her black hair was scattered around her delicate face, which made her delicate face look even paler. He didn't seem to be in a good condition. Fifth sister. Xiao Yanru didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would be in such a situation. She screamed and wanted to rush over, but was stopped by Chu Lu in front of the bed. First miss, please don't disturb the fifth Mississippi, Chu Lu said in a hoarse voice. She looked exhausted, but she still forced herself to stop her. Judging from the maid's appearance, she obviously had a hard time guarding Xiao Wanru. Was Xiao Wanru really in a coma and hadn't woken up yet? Was it even possible that she would never wake up? Xiao Yanru was overjoyed. If Xiao Wanru really died, her scheme would not be in vain. She slowly felt relieved. Can she take medicine these days? Xiao Yanru stood 10 feet away from the bed and asked softly. She rarely takes the medicine that has been decocted. The imperial physician said that she should keep decocting it and take as much as she can. It's better than not taking any medicine at all. Chu Lu said in a hoarse voice. Xiao Yanru looked at the steaming bowl of medicine on the table in front of the bed, and then thought of the medicine that the servant girl was brewing in the corridor and the imperial physicians guarding in the wing room. She took a deep breath and said, "What's wrong? Let me feed the medicine to the fifth sister," she said and turned to walk to the table. First miss, the medicine is still hot. You can't feed it yet. It has to cool down. Chu Lu shook her head and said. Xiao Yanru stopped and turned to Xiao Wanru. I've learned some medical skills before. I'll feel the fifth sister's pulse. In fact, she was still worried and had to check it in person. Chu Lu stopped her again. Yujie, who had been held by Shuqi, also pushed Shuqi away and stopped Xiao Yanru together with Chu Lu. The two maids looked extremely embarrassed, but their words made Xiao Yanru's face change. First miss, do you want to harm our master or the first Miss Qin? In the outer room, a group of people also stopped. Chapter 611. Xiao Yanru's face turned cold, and Shuqi took 2 steps forward to stand in front of her. She glared at Chu Lu and Yujie and shouted, "What are you talking about? Apologize to the first Mississippi. Don't you know how the first miss treats the fifth miss? The first miss specially came up the mountain to accompany the fifth miss for fear that the fifth miss would be lonely on the mountain. Besides, why did you go down the mountain before?" Chu Lu and Yujie looked at each other and hesitated. Yujie said, "She said that old Madame Qin was ill and asked our miss to go down the mountain to visit her. If she didn't go to visit her, she would be ungrateful." Yes, what happened in the Qin's mansion has nothing to do with our first Mississippi. Our first miss doesn't know what happened in the Qin's mansion. If someone knows it, he must be a member of the Qin's mansion. Think about who she offended when you were in the Qin's mansion and made her do this. Moreover, this person is familiar with the fifth miss's character and the internal affairs of the Qin's mansion. Shuqi reminded them. Chu Lu hesitated for a long while and asked hesitantly, "The first Miss Qin? Who else could it be except her? Think about it. She is the one who has so many conditions." Shuqi said angrily, "Our first miss loves the fifth miss and has always been very close to the fifth Mississippi. How could she hurt the fifth miss and want to kill her?" Her words sounded reasonable. Xiao Wanru, who was lying motionless on the bed, sneered in her heart. These words were said by Shuqi. No matter what Shuqi said or who she was referring to, it had nothing to do with her. She was still the gentle and kind first Miss Xiao. Even if someone thought that this servant girl had gone too far, she was just a servant girl. Who could do anything to a servant girl who protected her master? Xiao Yanru was indeed a good servant girl. However, it would not be so easy for her to get out of the predicament today. Even though Xiao Yanru was smart and could deal with all kinds of tricks, she couldn't deal with Qin Yuru, who was furious and only knew how to fight back. Xiao Yanru couldn't be blamed for what had happened before. If there was, it should be a few words spread by Qing, or after she went crazy. However, since Qing had gone crazy, few people believed her words. She just deliberately asked others to spread more words about Xiao Yanru. As expected, Xiao Yanru couldn't sit still. Although she closed her eyes, she could hear clearly that Qin Yuru had been led to the outer room. Is it really Miss Qin? But it has been so many years, and first Miss Qin is now the young madam of Duke Yong. She has nothing to do with our Mississippi. Why did she still do this kind of thing? Chu Lu looked at Yu Jie in confusion and seemed to be seeking support. Yu Jie was also at a loss. She looked at Chu Lu, Shuqi, and finally fixed her eyes on Xiao Yanru. She asked in a trembling voice, "First Miss, does it really have nothing to do with you?" "Of course, this has nothing to do with me. Fifth sister and I are as close as brothers. Fifth sister has suffered so much in Qin's mansion and suffered so much. How can I not know? If this is really done by Qin Yuru, I can promise fifth sister that I will not let Qin Yuru off, even if she is the young madam of Duke Yong's mansion." Xiao Yanru said resolutely with a cold look and an extraordinary bearing, which could make people feel at ease. Even if she did not swear, people would feel that she was very sincere. "First Miss, but first Miss Qin is now the young madam of Duke Yong's mansion. If you want to deal with her, I'm afraid it's not possible." Chu Lu seemed to believe her words, stammered and said uneasily. Seeing that the two maids had believed her words, Xiao Yanru felt complacent in her heart, but her face became increasingly gentle. She comforted the two maids and said, "Don't worry. Even if she is the young madam of Duke Yong's mansion, the miss of our Duke Xing's mansion is not easy to bully. What's more, she has killed fifth sister. Even Duke Yong's mansion can't bear the consequences, let alone her." "That's right. Duke Yong's mansion is just a shabby marquis family. Do they really think they are so great?" Shuqi curled her lips and said disdainfully. In the outer room, Qin Yuru clenched her fists, gritted her teeth, and forced herself to listen. The old maid who led the way left here, leaving only her and her maid Mei Shui in the outer room. Mei Shui was so scared that her face turned pale, and she was so angry that her face turned livid. As her maternal grandma said, Xiao Yanru was up to no good. When Xiao Wanru was still in Qin's mansion, she had met her in private. On the surface, she was very kind to her, but in fact, she hinted to her to deal with Xiao Wanru and said that as long as she dealt with Xiao Wanru, she would get benefits. Of course, these words were not said by Xiao Yanru herself, but by her maid. She just listened quietly with a smile, as if these things had nothing to do with her. Sure enough, it was this vicious woman who stirred up trouble behind her back. If she hadn't provoked Qi Rongji to come here, she would not have done anything to Xiao Wanru at this time. Her maternal grandma said that if something really happened to Xiao Wanru, she would have to bear the consequences. Moreover, not only she, but also the whole Duke Yong's mansion. This was also an important reason why Qin Yuru repeatedly came to check on Xiao Wanru's situation. Even if it was an accident, Great Elder Princess would not let go of Duke Yong's mansion. Before marrying into Duke Yong's mansion, Qin Yuru had a beautiful imagination about Duke Yong's mansion. But after marrying into Duke Yong's mansion, she found that her imagination was wrong. Duke Yong's mansion was even inferior to her Qin's mansion. She fought hard to marry into Duke Yong's mansion, but found that not only did she not live a good life, but her life was getting worse and worse. Not to mention that she had no money to use, Di Yan took concubines one after another. She suffered from a bad reputation when marrying into Duke Yong's mansion, but she could not say anything, which made her hate her. Her mother-in-law not only did not help her, but also tried hard to protect her son. She said that she could marry into Duke Yong's mansion for the sake of old madam and asked her to be the young madam of Duke Yong's mansion. If she was not obedient, she might not even be the young madam of Duke Yong's mansion. In the past 2 years, Qin Yuru had lived an extremely depressed life. Even if she went to talk to her maternal grandma, who loved her dearly, about the concubines, her maternal grandma just asked her to keep quiet. Only then did she find that her maternal grandma loved Di Yan the most instead of her. Her maternal grandma felt extremely guilty about marrying her into Duke Yong's mansion. She agreed to bring concubines into Duke Yong's mansion as soon as Qin Yuru mentioned it, and she wanted to make it up to Di Yen. She had a very hard time in Duke Yong's mansion. After hearing Qi Rongji's words, she felt that even if something happened to Xiao Wanru, it was an accident and she had nothing to do with it. Now, after being reminded by her maternal grandma, she knew that if it happened to her, Duke Yong's mansion would not protect her, and she would probably live a more miserable life. Nothing could happen to her anymore. Absolutely not. She clenched her sleeves with her fingers and continued to listen to the conversation inside. She must find out Xiao Yenru's fault and put the blame on Xiao Yenru. It was Xiao Yenru who instigated her to do it. Why could Xiao Yenru show that she was on good terms with her sister while she was about to be trampled into the mud? This time, Qin Yuru really realized that she and Xiao Wanru were no longer sisters of equal status in the past. At that time, even if something happened to Xiao Wanru, she would be fine. But now, Xiao Wanru was the granddaughter of Great Elder Princess, and she was far from being in a position to be equal to Xiao Wanru. If something happened to Xiao Wanru, she was afraid that she would have to pay with her life. She was unwilling to accept it. "First Miss, are you really willing to avenge my master?" With tears falling from her eyes, Yujia looked at Xiao Yenru excitedly. "Of course. No matter how young Madame of Duke Yong quibbles, I will definitely make her pay for fifth sister's death," Xiao Yenru said. There were only her, Shuqi, and Xiao Wanru's two maids in the room, so she said some words very naturally. After all, such words couldn't be leaked out, or even if they were leaked out, she could deny it. Could the words of the two maids refute her words? But now, she had to win the trust of the two maids, so that she could go forward to feel Xiao Wanru's pulse in person and make sure of Xiao Wanru's condition. Xiao Yenru had read a lot of books and was involved in many aspects. She knew a little about this kind of simple pulse feeling. Although she might not be able to find out the cause of Xiao Wanru's illness, she could still distinguish whether it was good or bad. "First Miss." Chulu seemed to want to say something, but Shuqi became impatient and said, "Why are you two still talking here? My master is also worried about the 5th Mississippi. As for the young Madam of Duke Yong's mansion who hurt the 5th Miss, you don't have to worry at all. First Miss will definitely make her pay for 5th Miss's death." "Will it really happen?" Yujie was pleasantly surprised. She looked at Xiao Yenru but didn't look at Shuqi, as if begging Xiao Yenru to give her another guarantee. "Of course she will. Duke Xing's mansion will seek justice from Duke Yong's mansion even with all its power. You can rest assured." Xiao Yenru had to promise again. Seeing that the two maids looked restless, she said more and more seriously, "Thank you, First Miss." The two maids looked at each other and bowed deeply to Xiao Yenru excitedly. "Don't thank me. You are my 5th sister and the 5th Miss of Duke Xing's mansion. How can the young Madam of Duke Yong's mansion compare with you?" Xiao Yenru rarely said such harsh words, especially in front of others. But at this time, in order to win the trust of the two maids, she said it casually. Shuqi had always been the best at cooperating with Xiao Yenru. If Xiao Yenru said 1 or 2 points, she could say 5 or 6 points. Now Xiao Yenru said 5 or 6 points, so she could say full marks. After hearing Xiao Yenru's words, she immediately nodded and added, "The young Madam of Duke Xing's mansion is shameless. At that time, she not only seduced Prince Cheng, but also came to our mansion to pretend to be the young Madam of Duke Xing's mansion after being rejected by Prince Cheng. She doesn't know what a cheap woman she is. Now she dares to hurt the 5th Mississippi. She is really cheap and vicious. When we go back, ask old Madam to send someone to the Ministry of Justice. We must arrest this vicious and cheap woman and send her to the Ministry of Justice. Then we will parade her in the street and behead her." As soon as she finished speaking, the door of the inner room was kicked open. Chapter 612. "Xiao Yenru, how are you? You instigated me to do it, and now you are speaking ill of me and putting all the blame on me. You bitch, I'll beat you to death." Qin Yuru appeared at the door with a fierce and murderous look on her face. When she saw clearly the people in the inner room, she directly pounced on Xiao Yanru. Chu Lu and Yu Jie took 2 steps back and leaned against the bed to protect Xiao Wanru. They were so nervous that they knocked down the high gauze curtain. The gauze curtain fell down and covered Xiao Wanru's upper body, so that she could open her eyes and watch the farce outside through the gauze curtain. She brought the 2 of them together just for today's show. When Xiao Yanru saw Qin Yuru rushing over with a fierce look in her eyes, she had a bad feeling and took a step back nervously. In the past, she seldom made enemies with others on the surface and had always been generous and decent in front of others. She had never seen anyone rush over recklessly like Qin Yuru. Shuqi reacted quickly and rushed forward to stop Qin Yuru. However, Qin Yuru was so angry that she pushed Shuqi away and directly attacked Xiao Yanru behind her. Shuqi still wanted to stand up to protect Xiao Yanru, but Mei Shui, who was behind Qin Yuru, grabbed her, slapped her hard twice, and immediately knocked her out. Compared with Shuqi, Mei Shui had always been very strong. When she was in Jiangzhou, she often acted arrogantly with Qin Yuru. However, after entering the capital city, she was very unhappy, so she became more and more weak. However, she had heard from outside just now that if it hadn't been for the first Miss Xiao in front of her, her madam would have been in trouble. If something happened to her madam, she would not be able to live either. At this moment, just like Qin Yuru, she was also bold and had no time to care about other things. When she entered the room just now, her madam also told her to beat Xiao Yanru's people hard. Of course, she wouldn't be polite at this time. Shuqi was a little dizzy after being slapped. She shook her head and suddenly heard her master's sharp cry. She looked back in a hurry and saw Qin Yuru slapping her master several times and pulling her master's hair hard. She was so anxious that she wanted to stand up and help Xiao Yanru. However, Mei Shui didn't let her go either. She also pulled her master's hair and slapped her. Shuqi came to her senses and fought with Mei Shui. For a moment, the 2 maids were in a mess. After being slapped several times, Xiao Yanru had no time to care about her appearance. She resisted desperately and screamed. Chu Lu and Yu Jie seemed to be scared out of their wits. They stared blankly at them for a while before Chu Lu rushed out and shouted, "Help! Help!" They had made a lot of noise, which had alerted several imperial physicians who were waiting on the side. These imperial physicians were all invited from the imperial palace by Rui, and great elder princess. They had been confused by Xiao Wanru's coma and were thinking hard about how to wake up the 5th Miss Xiao. But now they were stunned when they heard the shrill scream of a woman coming from the main room. She. They came to them and they away with of they of with. And when they. When they, and they, who, and of them of they of who, they. When they came out of the imperial palace to treat the 5th Miss Xiao, the Empress Dowager had specially told them to cure the 5th Miss Xiao. Otherwise, they would be punished. They didn't know what had happened in the main room. They were afraid that the 5th Miss Xiao's life was in danger, so they didn't dare to stay and directly rushed in. When they got in and saw the scene in front of them, they were all stunned. The 2 maids were hitting each other, and the 2 masters were also hitting each other. By this time, their faces had already been slapped a few times and scratched a few times. The only one who could stop the current situation was the 5th Miss Xiao, who was lying on the bed. However, she was still in a coma now, so they couldn't do anything even if they wanted to. Xiao Yanru, you bitch. It's obvious that you asked Qi Rongji to send me a message, saying that you have a way to deal with Xiao Wanru and asked me to ask Xiao Wanru to go down the mountain. I thought you really cared about us and wanted to help me reconcile with my sister. So you deliberately used my grandma's illness to talk about it. It turns out that you are the most despicable ones. Seeing that someone came, Qin Yuru grabbed Xiao Yanru's hair and slapped Xiao Yanru's face hard with the other hand. Of course, these words were taught to her by old Madam of Duke Yong's mansion. She didn't expect to meet Xiao Yanru and just asked her to explain things to Great Elder Princess and Xiao Wanru. Unexpectedly, she didn't see Great Elder Princess and even Xiao Wanru was in a coma. Now seeing the imperial physician appear, she immediately said these words. All the imperial physicians were from the imperial palace. As long as she said these words, Xiao Yanru couldn't deny it even if she wanted to. You are talking nonsense. I don't know anything. Xiao Yanru was very scheming. In the past, she had buried her viciousness deep in her heart and had never been beaten like this. Moreover, she didn't expect that there would be a miss from an aristocratic family like Qin Yuru who came up to hit her recklessly. She was beaten painfully, but she knew that she couldn't admit it at this time. I am talking nonsense. Xiao Yanru, you don't want my sister to return to your Duke Xing's mansion because your Duke Xing's mansion wants to occupy the position of the heir of my second sister's father. Your Duke Xing's mansion should have been inherited by Sister Wanru's younger brother, but your second branch occupies the position and refuses to give it up. This time, you get rid of Sister Wanru first, and then her younger brother. Your second branch of Duke Xing's mansion is really good at scheming. Qin Yuru gnashed her teeth and said. What she heard outside just now had made her want to beat Xiao Yanru to death. She was in a difficult situation, but Xiao Yanru, the bitch, came up with a way to push her into such a trap. How could she spare her? While fighting with Xiao Yanru desperately, she said all the words that old madam of Duke Yong's mansion taught her. Xiao Wanru, who was lying on the bed, turned her body slightly and looked at Qin Yuru. She hadn't seen Qin Yuru for more than 2 years. It seemed that Qin Yuru had made some progress now. Under the guidance of old madam of Duke Yong's mansion, Qin Yuru actually knew how to talk about this matter in front of several imperial physicians at this time and made Xiao Yanru unable to finish her words. In this case, Xiao Yanru couldn't defeat Qin Yuru. You, let go of me. You are talking nonsense. Xiao Yanru was so dizzy that she didn't hear Qin Yuru's words at all. But she also knew that Qin Yuru said something bad, so she scolded loudly and pulled Qin Yuru's hand. All of you, stop. A stern shout came from the door. Rui, a great elder princess, who got the news, appeared at the door of the room with several madams. Seeing everything inside, she trembled with anger and ordered servants to separate the two people. Several old maids came over and forcefully pulled the two people who were entangled in the fight apart. Looking at the current situation, the two people's clothes were disheveled, and their hair was messy. A few strands of hair had been torn off on the ground. Their faces were even worse. Both of them had black and blue noses and swollen faces, and scratches could be seen on their faces. Although the scratches were not very deep, they were really disgraceful. They didn't look like misses from aristocratic families at all. They were no different from shrews on the street. After the two masters were separated, the two servant girls were naturally separated with bruised noses and swollen faces. Great elder princess, what happened to Sister Wanru really has nothing to do with me. Please help me. I followed Xiao Yanru's words, which Qi Rongji asked Xiao Yanru to pass on. She said that she could help us reconcile and asked me to invite Sister Wanru to come down with the excuse of Grandma's illness. I was young and ignorant in the past, so I kept a distance from Sister Wanru. Now I especially want to make friends with Sister Wanru, but I was used by Xiao Yanru. Qin Yuru threw herself in front of Great Elder Princess and cried loudly, ignoring the scratches on her face. These were all taught by old Madam of Duke Yong early. She had planned to cry directly when she met Great Elder Princess, but she didn't expect to meet Great Elder Princess until now. Although Qin Yuru had disappeared from the circle of noble ladies in the capital for so long, what she had done at that time was so appalling that there were still people who would inquire about her from time to time after more than 2 years, and they also knew that she was living a bad life in Duke Yong's mansion. Her words confirmed that she had lived a bad life. In this case, she should indeed reconcile with her former sister. After all, Xiao Wanru was not an ordinary Mississippi. Her words sounded very reasonable. There was indeed someone behind her. Great Elder Princess, she is obviously talking nonsense. Even if Qi Rongji has an agreement with her, it has nothing to do with me. I didn't say anything to her. How could she frame me? I was very anxious when something happened to my fifth sister, so I came to see her. I didn't expect to meet this crazy woman. Please uphold justice for me, great elder princess. Xiao Yanru pulled herself together and forcibly controlled her emotions. She also walked to great elder princess, knelt down, and argued, what happened in Qin's mansion has nothing to do with me. I don't know what the young madam of Duke Yong has done to me. I have done to you. First Miss Xiao, the second branch of Duke Xing's mansion has always been very concerned about the position of heir of Duke Xing, hasn't it? In this case, it naturally won't let the first branch and Sister Wanru have a good life. You deceived Sister Wanru to go down the mountain with the excuse that I was eager to make friends with Sister Wanru. Now you want to hurt her. You deserve to die. Qin Yuru reached out to point at Xiao Yanru and scolded loudly. When she got angry, she reached out to hit Xiao Yanru. Fortunately, the people around Great Elder Princess stopped her. Great Elder Princess looked at them with a cold face and seemed to be unable to make a judgment for a moment. Finally, she waved her hand and said tiredly, you can go back. This matter will be investigated by the officials of the Ministry of Justice. The officials of the Ministry of Justice should be able to find out who wants to hurt Zhuozhuo. As for the future, don't come here. Zhuozhuo hasn't woken up yet, but you two can fight in front of her bed. Who cares about her? Qin Yuru still wanted to say something, but she had been helped up by an old maid and pulled out. Xiao Yanru was also pulled up by the people of Great Elder Princess's mansion. They were led out by their respective old maids, leaving a few madams who came with Great Elder Princess and shook their heads secretly. Originally, they all thought that the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion was a good person, but now they felt that this first miss was really a schemer. Young Madam of Duke Yong's mansion didn't live a good life in Duke Yong's mansion. At this time, it was very possible that she wanted to make friends with her former sister. And Duke Xing's mansion seemed to intend to pass the title of Duke Xing's mansion to the second branch. If this was true, the first Miss Xiao was really not clean. Or not only the first Miss Xiao, but also Duke Xing's mansion was not clean. But the specific situation depended on the results of the Ministry of Justice's investigation. So, noisy. A low voice suddenly came from the bed, breaking the strange silence in the room. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.